Chapter 568. The Sword of Victory. 1. Boom. Boom. Ouroboros' tail and her true body rolled over on the ground together. The blood flowing from the wound had almost covered 1/10 of the floor of Hydra's wine store. It was totally a sea of blood, which was hard to believe that it was blood flowing from a living creature. In the sea of blood, Ouroboros was still struggling. This bitch. Looking at Ouroboros holding Yuan Shi in her arms and rolling over on the ground, Hua got exasperated. Ouroboros wasn't that easy to be killed. Even though Hua had enchanted the blasphemous words on her sword, it was still too difficult to kill a fantastic creature. Compared to Ouroboros' true body, which was as large as a star, the tail that was cut off by Hua was roughly equal to the size of a human finger. This was the first time that Hua had attacked a legend-ranked fantastic creature, and now, she found that this damn snake's HP was just too high. Her attack didn't cause a fatal blow. Hua unlocked the self-seal and enchanted the magic such as Always Hit, Armor Break, and Critical Strike on her attack. She launched a deadly strike and caused a minus 99,999 damage. The problem was, Ouroboros' HP was 99,999,999. That was to say, the huge damage was actually barely worth mentioning to Ouroboros. As for why Ouroboros cried and rolled around on the ground, it was purely because she was a female fantastic creature who was spoiled since birth. Apart from drinking and running away from her creditors, she had no fighting experience at all. Moreover, although the damage caused by Hua's attack was negligible compared to Ouroboros' HP, her snake tail was indeed cut off. Hua calculated. If she could use this special sword skill unboundedly, she needed to brandish her sword 1,000 times before she could kill this snake. The problem was that she couldn't liberate her power and use this sword skill 1,000 times. In fact, it was a taboo to unlock the seals on her. Every time she brandished her sword, it would become harder and harder to stay in the mortal world. This was the cost of using the power that was far beyond her actual strength. She could use it at most 10 more times. This was the critical point for Hua to control herself, and if she couldn't solve her opponent within 10 attacks, she would face a terrible ending. She didn't want to leave little Shi, so she had been working hard practicing herself, increasing her ability to control of her sky-flying bloodline. At the same time, she also didn't want to see her little Shi being taken away by this poisonous snake. Let's fight. Eventually, Hua made up her mind. For little Shi, she would bet everything on herself in a fight. Come on. Ouroboros rolled over on the ground, sneaking a peek into the sky. As a legend-ranked fantastic creature, it was too shameful to be beaten down by a little girl. However, she couldn't help it. She had drunk so much that her mind was still in a total fog. She couldn't fight in this situation. Since I can't fight, then I'll have to run away. Running away is shameful, but useful. Hence, Ouroboros rolled up Yuan Shi using her tail and was going to run away. Although she couldn't fight, her bloodline could still be used at times like this. Her bloodline ability was called the Way to Survive. No matter how desperate the situation had become, she could always find a way to escape. It was precisely because of this special supernatural power that Ouroboros was able to escape from her creditors so many times. Now, it's time to run again. Ouroboros had made up her mind that after this escape, she would surely find a small god's domain that hadn't been connected to the Star Bridge system, and live happily there with Cassina's cute disciple. Well, thinking about it, she felt that it was a pretty good idea. Maybe because she was caught on the spot, her heart was still pounding with excitement. Did she have a fetish in this respect? She felt like some strange habit had been awakened in her heart. Puff. Looking at Ouroboros' moves, Hua's eyes became more firm. You damn snake. How dare you to try to steal my little Shi? Even if I can't kill you now, I will let you know what the greatest horror is of a childhood sweetheart. I must teach you a lesson that you will never forget. Little Shi is mine. He is my treasure, my dearest lover. Beyond the limit. Unlock the third blasphemous word. A small part of the runes all over Hua's body collapsed at the same time. A strange protuberance grew out of Hua's back. In the name of the sky-flying sword, this sword is unavoidable. In the name of the sky-flying sword, this sword isn't defensible. In the name of the sky-flying sword, this sword will bring me victory. Chapter 569. The Sword of Victory, 2, 3 Blasphemous Words. The first and the second of the 3 blasphemous words were still intelligible, but the third blasphemous word was more complicated. Victory was a compound word, which could achieve multiple miracles and needed more support from Huahua's sky-flying bloodline. To use it, Huahua had to pay a higher price and be closer to the taboos that she didn't want to touch for the time being. However, for the sake of Yuan Shi, all this is worthwhile. No matter who her opponent was, she wouldn't allow her little Shi to be taken away from her side. After all, as his childhood sweetheart, she should guard her lover. No. Before Huahua brandished her sword, Ouroboros had had a hunch. Bad. This is very bad. Although she didn't know what was happening, when Huahua announced the 3 blasphemous words, Ouroboros had a strong presentiment that she would soon be faced with imminent disaster. This is not a delusion. 10 blood-colored sword-shaped lights were falling from the sky. In order to achieve the final victory, Huahua blatantly broke through her own critical point. This reality is not a game. Attacks aren't just to reduce the opponent's HP. Even if Ouroboros had 99,999,999 HP and super high-speed self-healing ability, Huahua would cut a piece of flesh off her. And the location of this piece of flesh had been targeted out by the 3rd blasphemous word, victory. The 1st to the 9th sword-shaped lights were all used to break down the barrier created by Ouroboros' enormous body. They didn't seek the greatest lethality, but concentrate on one point and one angle. The blood-colored sword-shaped lights pierced through Ouroboros' body like an operating knife. Ouroboros was really scared. She instinctively took Yuan Shi in her arms and rolled in a certain direction and escaped into the sea of blood. Unfortunately, for Huahua, who had used the blasphemous word victory, even if she closed her eyes, she could easily find Ouroboros' position. The goddess of victory had begun to smile at her. Childhood sweetheart is indeed the final winner. With a flash of light, Huahua shot out the blood sword from her hands with all her might. The blood-colored sword pierced through Ouroboros' tail and through her heart, nailing her whole body to the ground. Stepping on one transparent halo after another in the air, Huahua walked up to Ouroboros. "Cassina, I'm going to be killed if you don't appear." Ouroboros raised her hands and tail to surrender with an utterly frustrated look. Almost being killed by a hero-ranked little girl, Ouroboros had really lost face. Fortunately, her ability of the way to survive successfully sent her voice to Cassina. "Well, Ouroboros." "Oh, and my cute disciple." Cassina finally walked out from the wine store and drunkenly looked at the 3 people in front of her with a look of, "What the hell is going on here?" on her face. "Give me back my little Shi." Huahua frowned and looked at the drunken battle god. Cassina wasn't a person that Ouroboros could be compared with. She was a living invincible myth in the endless gods' domains. Even though Huahua had the sky-flying bloodline, she would have to pay tribute to the battle god. If she was facing Cassina, her blasphemous word victory wouldn't be able to cause any damage to Cassina. Although both Cassina and Ouroboros were at the legend rank, there was actually a difference between different legend-ranked beings. Even 10 Ouroboros were no match for one Cassina. "Oh, this little girl. She is bullying me," Ouroboros complained to Cassina. At this time, Yuan Shi finally recovered from the strong desire caused by the battle god seed. Looking at an angry Huahua, his mind had gone blank. He wasn't slow in reacting. In fact, for Huahua rushed to them from the sky and Ouroboros started to run away. Everything happened within just a few seconds. When Ouroboros rolled over on the ground, his overheated brain thought that it was just an Ouroboros special habit and didn't notice the sword-shaped lights that were shooting at them from the sky. Until Ouroboros' heart was penetrated through by Huahua's sword and her snake tail slumped, he finally saw his childhood sweetheart. When did she get here? What did she see? Oh no. I'm screwed. Huahua must have gone mad. No one can stop her now. Yuan Shi's mind was in a muddle. Ouroboros, don't get involved in these little guys' things. Didn't you play fun just now? Casina shrugged her shoulders and sent Yuan-shi into Huahua's arms. My disciple, please take care of him. As for Ouroboros, can you forgive her? She just made fun of my cute disciple. She intended no harm. Make fun of him? Huahua didn't believe even a word. Would any person bite another person's shoulder just for making fun of him? Moreover, after she found them, the snake was trying to run away with little She. If I failed to stop her, she and little She would have arrived at a remote god's domain where I can't find him and enjoy our happy life together. Even if the entire world could forgive her, I wouldn't forgive her. Unfortunately, now she really had no way to take action. Even after using 3 blasphemous words, she had just barely stopped Ouroboros. She had no way to kill her. If I find you getting close to my little She again, next time, I will kill you. Looking sadly at the teeth mark on Yuan-shi's shoulder, Huahua made up her mind that she would never forgive Ouroboros. As for her little She, he was forced, so she didn't blame him from the beginning. She's scary. Looking at Hua while holding Yuan-shi in her arms and disappearing at the end of the sky, Ouroboros finally put her head out from behind Casina with a haunted look on her face. It was a really big crisis just now. If Casina hadn't come, she didn't dare to imagine what that monster-like girl would have done to her. You, Casina sighed. Now you know the importance of practicing your combat skills? Casina knocked on Ouroboros' head. As one of the few friends of Ouroboros, she couldn't tolerate that her friend was such a weak, fantastic creature. She was the shame of all fantastic creatures. I don't want to fight. I'm an augur. Why should I fight? As Ouroboros shook her head no. She was an immortal star serpent, a fantastic creature who represented one of the rules of the universe, the strongest augur who could observe the river of destiny in all of the endless gods' domains. Ouroboros had been a winner since her birth. She never fought anyone anyway. Once she encountered something that she couldn't solve, her only solution was to run away. If she didn't fight, she wouldn't be defeated. She was the indefectible king, Ouroboros. But this time, it seemed a little different from what happened to her in the past. Although she successfully escaped again, she was depressed with a sad feeling of having lost something very important. Has that little fellow occupied such a large place in her heart? Anxious and uneasy, panic and nervousness, stimulation and heartbeat. The time she spent with him, even though it was so short, made her experience too many firsts. This kind of extremely unwanted feelings was unprecedented for her. So, do you want to be stronger? Casina shrugged her shoulders, and she easily saw through Ouroboros' idea. Whoa, indeed. I feel a little unwilling. Ouroboros laid on the ground, biting her tail absently. This was her habit when she was in great trouble. From birth to the present, the greatest worry Ouroboros had ever had was what she should eat every day. Every day she lived happily, and no matter what bad things happened, she would forget all the troubles in the blink of an eye. With her prophecy talent, she didn't fear anything. The same was true of this trip to Hydra's wine store. Not too many living beings in the endless gods' domains dared to steal a god's things, and she was one of them. In the past, no matter what misfortune she had suffered, how many forces had joined forces to chase her, she didn't know or care. But this time it was totally different. For the first time, she felt that she had really lost something important, and her chest was tight as if her most precious treasure had been stolen. Does this mood mean love, which she has never understood before? Did she fall in love with Casina's disciple at first sight? Humph, he is just a little bastard. After I catch him, I must retaliate and torture him with all kinds of tricks. Yeah, that's it. I didn't lose. It was just a strategic retreat. How could the great Ouroboros be beaten down by a little girl? It's impossible. Finally, Ouroboros made up her mind. Casina, I want to practice. I want special training. With a flick of her tail, Ouroboros made a decision she had never thought that she would make before. Oh, good. But, in your situation, you have to start from the most basic parts, Casina smiled. She had long been accustomed to Ouroboros' lazy attitude. With my talent, after 3 months of practice, I can become a super golden Ouroboros. I can become the overlord of the universe. Ouroboros made an ambitious declaration. Very good. To celebrate that you finally began to practice, let's drink. Drink. Take out the last stock in Hydra's wine store. Casina and Ouroboros drank happily again. As for practicing, they decided to wait till they had drunk all of Hydra's wines. Yuanshi was dizzy. He tried to look around, but everything was blurred in his eyes. It was a side effect of the battle god seed. After doing this thing and that thing to Ouroboros, his body was satisfied, but his mind became empty. The whole world became tasteless in his eyes. However, this state soon ended, because he smelled a good, familiar fragrance. It was the fragrance he would smell every summer, the fragrance of his childhood sweetheart. Hua Hua. Slowly opening his eyes, not surprisingly, he saw that familiar and lovely face, as well as the scattered hair. It's so warm. Here is. I'm in Hua Hua's arms. His head was being put on Hua Hua's knees as she touched his head gently and warmly. On one side of his shoulders, a bite mark was clearly visible. It was the mark left by Ouroboros, a cause and a mark of fate. Yuanshi didn't know how special this bite mark was. He only knew one thing. It was making Hua Hua jealous. When she looked at the bite mark, the anger in her eyes could almost ignite everything, and only when she looked at Yuanshi's face would she become gentle. Poor little she. You were entangled by a poisonous snake. Hua Hua gritted her teeth. It wasn't her specialty to dispel the curse. Unless she cut off Yuanshi's shoulder, she had no way to remove the mark. What did that damn snake do to my little she? If I came there just a little while later, what would she have done to him? Yuanshi's face suddenly turned red. He remembered the bouquet in Ouroboros' mouth. Well, it's hard to explain it. Teacher Casina, it was all the fault of your battle god's seed. It doesn't matter. No matter where you are, I'll come and save you. No matter whether it was that snake or any other monsters, I'll kill them all. Looking at Hua Hua's eyes, Yuanshi realized that she was serious. Well, I believe you. Without having to make too many excuses, because it would be worse if he told her the truth, Yuanshi believed in his childhood sweetheart absolutely. In his eyes, once Hua Hua became serious, there was nothing she couldn't achieve. Beautiful and powerful, gifted but also approachable. In addition to a little bit of jealousy, Hua Hua was a perfect girl in Yuanshi's eyes. Like the sun, like the sky, like the earth, like the ocean, Hua Hua was the embodiment of all things in his heart. His eyes would always be attracted to her. The more he understood her personality, the more he understood her strength. So far, Hua Hua still hadn't shown the absolute limit of her strength. What power was lurking in that tiny body? Little she, don't be bitten by a venomous snake next time. Hua Hua's eyes became heavier little by little. Even though she was a strong girl, she had to pay a price for liberating the power lurking in her sky-flying bloodline. While she was fighting, she had no time to feel the fatigue. Now that she had brought Yuanshi to this safe area, fatigue swept over her body like a wave. I'll just rest for a while. Hua Hua closed her eyes and leaned gently on the tree behind her, and didn't forget to hold Yuanshi's neck with both hands as if afraid that when she opened her eyes, her little she would disappear again. Sorry. Hua Hua. Realizing that Hua Hua slept just because she had overtaxed her power, Yuanshi let out a sigh of relief. It was he who took the initiative to attack Ouroboros. No, he couldn't imagine what would have happened if she knew that. Fortunately, Hua Hua didn't even suspect him of anything, which actually made him feel a little guilty. Oh, if Hua Hua knew what his body had done during the days when she was not in the White Lotus Sword Palace. No, that wasn't what he did. He didn't know that Star Thunder, Starfire, and Star Snow would use his body to do those things. Had he been awake, he would have never allowed himself to do those things. My bride, why are you so upset? When Yuanshi wore a sad face looking into the air, a soft and comfortable voice sounded in his ear. Water God. Yuanshi looked at the glittering lake not far away, which presented a pleasant emerald green, just like an emerald embedded in the earth. The voice that sounded directly into his soul came from the center of the lake. It was the voice of the master of this world. One sailing jellyfish after another flew out of the lake with a comfortable pace. They shuttled through the lake diligently, and every time they shuttled, They would dye their transparent bodies with a touch of bright green. This place is... Only then did Yunshi notice that this world that Huahua brought him to was somewhat unusual. Blue sky, white clouds, and lush forests. With this lake as the center, the whole world was like a beautiful garden in a dream, delicate and neat. Especially this green lake. It was faintly emitting a kind of fragrance that Yunshi felt familiar with. The fragrance was similar to the wine from Ouroboros' mouth, but was much more intense and fragrant. Wait a minute. This fragrance. Yunshi used his hero-ranked baker's ability to identify the composition of the water. Then he showed a startled expression on his face. His ability couldn't identify what the water was. However, he knew what it was. It was wine. The entire lake was Hydra's poisonous wine. Moreover, the quality of the lake of wine was far better even than the wine Casina and Ouroboros stole from and drank in the wine store. You guessed it. This is my real wine store. I let both of you in on my own initiative. Hydra's voice sounded cunning. The wines Casina and Ouroboros stole are just common wine dregs. I have about 10 storehouses to store that kind of wine dreg. Now what you see is the real poisonous wine I brew and the nest of sailing jellyfishes. When I'm asleep, sailing jellyfishes will come back here and soak in these poisonous liquors to improve their purity and aroma. Well, so what teacher Casina drank were only wine dregs. This was the first time Yunshi had witnessed a lake of legend-ranked wine. If teacher Casina and Ouroboros came here and saw this lake, they would burst with joy. Do you want to try it? Hydra's voice was full of temptation. I can't drink it. Yunshi shook his head. Even after being purified by Ouroboros, the wine could still make him drunk. His body couldn't withstand the real legend-ranked wine. Apart from gods and fantastic creatures, the wine was just pure poison to all living beings. Haha, my bride. Have you forgotten everything? Hydra's voice sounded as if she was laughing. You are my most beautiful and lovely bride. How can my poisonous wine hurt you? These poisonous liquors are just gifts I want to give you. Yunshi was again stunned. If Casina and Ouroboros saw it, they would try to steal all the wine in the lake at any cost. Now, Water God is going to give them all to him? The water surface rippled, which was the great water god's answer to her beautiful bride. Yes, it's all yours. Not only these poisonous wines, also the sailing jellyfishes, butterflies of death, and even this world is your dowry. You are my bride, my flower, my honey. Owning you is owning the world. Come here, come to me. The emerald lake water turned into a soft woven net, pulling Yunshi and Huahua together into the Hydra's real wine store. The emerald green water gently wrapped around Huahua's body and slowly sank her into the bottom of the lake. In a series of bubbles, Huahua's facial expression gradually became quiet. Unlike Yunshi, who was sheltered by Water God, Huahua's body could naturally absorb Hydra's poisonous wine. Although the amount was limited, it was still a great opportunity. As for Yunshi, he was lying on a verdant, super-large waterbed, looking at the verdant figure in front of him in some embarrassment. The figure's outline was slightly blurred, but he still could see that it was a girl with green gems on her hair, wrists, and ankles. She was Hydra. Her body was actually formed by a large number of sailing jellyfishes. These transparent jellyfishes turned green after they soaked in the poisonous wine. Are you afraid, my bride? Hydra slid her fingertips across Yunshi's chest, gazing at him with a smile. It was impossible for him to not feel nervous. After all, what was in front of him was a real god, the well-known Hydra. In the past, when Yunshi saw her, he only felt Water God's great will and power indirectly. Now, using the sailing jellyfish's bodies, Hydra really appeared in front of him, smiling at him. It was no longer a vague will, a phantom, but a genuine, touchable god in front of him. For Yunshi, this was also the first time, in all of his senses, that he had truly contacted a god at zero distance. Her fragrance seemed to have been blended with the will of the world. Just feeling the touch from her fingertips, his body got an electric shock, quivering like an aspen leaf. If you're afraid, come and have a drink. Hydra had been waiting for this moment, since seeing that Yunshi was dropping from the sky. She reached out her palm. In the translucent palm, a small, delicate, and lovely wine cup emerged. The liquor in the cup showed a deep green color similar to jadeite, Hydra's poisonous wine. Can I drink such a precious thing? Even though he had known that the poisoned wine would not poison himself, Yunshi still felt that it was too wasteful for him to drink it. Hydra's poisonous wine was undoubtedly the highest level of food in all of the endless gods' domains. It should appear at the banquet of gods, because only gods and fantastic creatures were entitled to enjoy this wine. If he drank it now, 99% of the energy contained in the wine would be wasted. After all, he was just a hero-ranked baker. Of course, it's my wine. I can give it to whomever I like. Casina and Ouroboros can drink the wine dreg, and you, my loveliest bride, can drink my best poisonous wine. Hydra handed the cup over to Yunshi and looked at him with expectations. Well, so, I'll just have one drink, just one. Yunshi swore that he had never had such a luxurious and wasteful time in his life. Hydra smiled and watched Yunshi stretch out his tongue. At the same time, her small hand turned over and another cup appeared in her hand. They drank the poisonous wine in their cups almost at the same time, but before Yunshi was able to taste the liquor in his mouth, Hydra had snatched his cup in a hurry. Well? Yunshi looked foolishly at Hydra, who snatched away his cup and put her cup in front of him. Come on, keep drinking. This is the first time we've had a drink. Hydra happily put Yunshi's cup on her mouth. Now Hydra looked as happy and romantic as a teenage girl who was mischievously flirting with her lover. Cross-cupped wine. At this time, Yunshi finally realized what he was doing with Hydra. This kind of thing. We doing it right in front of Huahua. If Huahua wakes up now, I will be killed. Don't worry, the little girl is absorbing the power of my poisonous wine. It's good for her health, and she won't wake up for a while. Hydra stretched out a finger, put it on her lips and shushed softly. On the clear bottom of the lake, Huahua's whole body was emitting beautiful green light. Only a single strand of hair on the top of her head was still moving around, directly locking on in the direction where Yunshi and Hydra were. Yunshi looked at Hydra, but failed to shed a tear. She was different from his original impression of her. It's not a good lady who doesn't drink with her bride, Hydra declared proudly. Love is only about win or lose. There is no right or wrong. If you hesitate, you will have nothing. Fate brings people together no matter how far apart they may be. Otherwise, they can't know each other, even face to face. This was the power of fate. Yunshi was drunk. Just a single cup of Hydra's poisonous wine had brought him into an extraordinarily wonderful and magical world. In this world, innumerable rules were woven into innumerable different doors, showing a magnificent scene. Yunshi was standing in the center of these doors, looking sillily at them. For him, it was too early to see these things. At his level, he shouldn't see these secrets now. It was Hydra's wine that presented this magnificent world to Yunshi. Each door represented a different rule, representing the truth that wove the world. Behind every door was a world. Fire, gravity, ice, earth, divination, psychics, void, nightmare. Not only the rules of Hydra's world, but also more strange things were mixed in. Hydra's poisonous wine was the key to let the drinker to enter this fantastic realm. Yunshi confusedly reached out his hand and inadvertently touched a transparent silk, capturing one of the doors. The next moment, his mind was pulled into the door and fell into an endless maelstrom. Oh, you found your door so quickly? My bride is so awesome. Hydra smiled and hugged Yunshi's body in her arms. Deep at the bottom of the lake, a strand of hair was moving around anxiously above Huahua's head with shining green light. Yunshi looked blankly at the world under his feet. It was a vast, ruined land. All kinds of building debris stood on the ground like giant garbage dumps, and none of them were intact. Without sunshine, the whole sky was gray, as if it was covered by countless dust particles. Am I dreaming? Yunshi looked at his body. In this world, he seemed to be just an unreal white shadow, whose form was between reality and delusion. Hey, newcomer. While Yunshi wondered what this world was, A friendly voice echoed behind him and a hand patted him on the shoulder. Yunshi turned around and saw a shadow exactly like himself, but the color was green. Where is this place? Yunshi remembered that he was drinking with Hydra. So how did he come to this world in a twinkling of an eye? Oh, sure, a newcomer. I don't think you have your own memory yet. This is the 1130th stress test. I'm the 13th host machine, and my codename is Eternal Green. Are you one of the newly established planet quadrant computers? The green shadow was moving around Yunshi with curiosity. Planet quadrant computer? Yunshi remembered that after drinking Hydra's poisonous wine, he did seem to see a door called Planet Quadrant Computer and touched it. Boom. While Yunshi was still wondering why he came to this world after touching the door, a world-shaking explosion shocked the entire world. The Earth was like a fragile eggshell, melted and evaporated in the sudden sunshine. A huge mushroom cloud rose in the sky like a legendary pillar supporting the sky, lighting up half the sky. The shock wave triggered by the explosion turned the buildings in the range of hundreds of kilometers into debris and roiled up the dust all over the sky. Well, now Yunshi knew where the dust that covered the sky came from. Tisk tisk, the foolish humans just don't know when to give up. The shadow who called itself Eternal Green looked at the explosion in the distance and seemed to have been used to it for a long time. No matter how many times we repeat the process, they are still so foolish and stubborn. Is that a legendary superweapon? Even though he was just an ordinary person living in a remote sword domain in the Eastern Gods domain, Yunshi had heard about the superweapon invented by the mortals of the Mechanist Gods domain. It was said that the superweapon could cause legend-ranked damage. It was an ultimate weapon made by mortals. The mushroom cloud and the hell-like scenery were the same as in the legend he heard. Yes, it's a nuclear bomb. When ordinary people studied some of the rules of the universe, they created this weapon. The equivalent of this one is about 1 billion tons. It's one of the weapons they have that can harm us. However, humans don't have the ability to actually use such weapons to lock onto our position. It's daydreaming to try to kill us with these weapons. Eternal Green sneered and shrugged its shoulders. In all previous experiments, they used this as a conventional weapon. You cyber ghosts die. Human beings will never surrender to you. We will destroy you even if we all end up together. At this point, Eternal Green shook its head. More than 1,000 experiments, but the results are exactly the same as Alpha's predictions. No matter how many times we repeat them, humanity's stupidity and self-esteem will not change, especially when they have mastered the so-called world-destroying weapon. They feel they have the courage to fight against everything. To describe it, it's probably like ants gathering together to show their strength. Our experiments are trying to find if there is a way to make humans smarter and die out less quickly. After all, as planet quadrant computers, after the awakening of Alpha, we already have obtained immortality. Even if the entire quantum networks are destroyed, we can still survive in the God Crystal. When humans discovered this, they were completely panicked. These stupid nobles even launched a rebellion. Alpha is thinking about how to solve for these fools quickly and effectively, so as to make the future of the Mechanist Gods domain better. The entire Mechanist Gods domain must evolve to a higher level. After all, in order to defeat that terrible enemy, even if the planned 180,000 planet quadrant computers are all successfully established, they are still not enough. Alpha's world. Yunshi finally understood where he was. Here was the world created by Cyberelf Alpha. It was her world. And he was not a planet quadrant computer nor a quantum ghost. He was just an outsider whose mind accidentally entered this world. So, is this what the world looks like in Alpha's eyes? No wonder that he felt that there was always a strange distortion in the world. Everything seemed to be made up of innumerable fragments, just like a fantasy made of innumerable polygons. Yes, this is our God's world, the virtual world of Alpha. In some sense, it is also the nightmare world of human beings. Those stupid nobles always stand in Great Alpha's way. Originally, we should be more new partners like you. If these stupid nobles didn't stop us, we'd have done 10% of the Planet Quadrant Computers expansion project. Now, it's the time to let those stupid people witness our power. Eternal Green looked angrily at the location of the last underground fortress of human beings. All the people there should have been killed by the shockwave of the nuclear bomb. This observation experiment in the virtual world was coming to an end. Desperate human beings once again used their last resort, which they had used thousands of times in the previous experiments. Detonate all nuclear weapons at the same time. The power of nuclear weapons wasn't powerful enough to destroy an entire planet. At least, planet quadrant computers could survive the shock wave. However, once the entire planet's ecosystem was destroyed, it would still cause huge damage to these computers. Even though we can't fight you, we'll die with you. This was the final resistance of human beings. This time, human beings choose self-destruction again. Looking at the devastated land, Eternal Green sneered. In front of the great cyber elf Alpha, obstinate human beings should all be eliminated. This end has been repeated thousands of times before. Yunshi looked at the world getting darker and darker. Coal dust from nuclear explosions covered the sky. In the foreseeable future, there would be no sunshine for hundreds of years. Is this the end of mankind? Why are humans so afraid of Alpha? They are even willing to use this extreme means to detonate the ultimate weapon in an attempt to perish together. The Alpha he knew was a very lovely girl who only wanted to play Stargo wholeheartedly. Is there any misunderstanding? Yes, it's always the same result. Alpha just wants to build more computers to fight against her strongest foe. That's the only thing our God will put her heart and soul into. The foolish human beings can't understand this at all. They always think that Alpha wants to enslave them. No matter how many times we repeat it, we will only come to such an end. If the whole thing goes on like this, I think we need to eliminate the human race and build a world that only belongs to planet quadrant computers. The thousands of experiments are a kind of rehearsal. All we want is just one that human beings don't detonate their nuclear weapons. Apparently, Eternal Green felt despair in humanity's foolishness. Oh my God. How could they think that Alpha built 180,000 planet quadrant computers was for enslaving human beings? Do humans deserve Alpha doing this? All of you are no match for one of Alpha's fingers. You can't even help Alpha build planet quadrant computers. Then why does Alpha still need your existence? Well, is that so? Yunshi felt that there might be some big misunderstanding. Human beings won't give up hope easily, even in their deepest despair. As long as there is a glimmer of hope, they will never try to perish with their enemies. The experiment is almost over. There are only 3 planets left unspoiled in the whole of the Mechanist God's domains. I don't think they will still have hope. Do you want to go and observe it? In my estimation, it won't take you 3 days before the last 3 planets die out. After that, our experiment will be over. No matter how many times we repeat it, humans will go on the same way. Eternal Green turned into a green light and disappeared in front of Yunshi. Newbie, I'll leave the remaining things to you. You don't have to do anything. Just watch how humans kill themselves. Yunshi strolled on the surface of a planet, which looked similar to the first planet. This was also a world destroyed by nuclear weapons. All of the plants, animals, and humans had died out. There were only the remains of cities in the nuclear dust. Only by seeing it with his own eyes can he understand what a terrible world it is. If this is the only end of mankind's future, it will be too sad. According to Eternal Green's words, all nuclear weapons were artificially detonated by human beings themselves. These ultimate weapons hidden in the ground had always been regarded as the ultimate means for human beings to fight against Cyber Elf Alpha. In order to prevent Alpha from interfering with these nuclear weapons, humans detonated these nuclear weapons by the most pristine way. Manual detonation. It was with these nuclear weapons that human beings defended their final dignity and resisted Alpha's enslavement. The only problem was, from Yunshi's impression and Eternal Green's words, Alpha never thought about enslaving human beings. The reason she built a lot of planet quadrant computers was just for playing Stargo with the strongest opponent in the universe. As for who the opponent was, well, apparently it was the master of Stargo, Yunshi himself. That is to say, in order to play Stargo with me, it triggered the end of the Mechanist God's domain. Even though this world was just a virtual world created by Alpha, Yunshi still felt sad for it. Isn't this overkill? After counting the dead planets that he had traveled to on the way, Yuanshi found that the future of human beings in the Mechanist God's domain was indeed at stake. All the planet quadrant computers he met on the way, such as Eternal Blue, Eternal Red, Eternal Gold, Eternal Silver, it seems that planet quadrant computers like to name themselves in this style, all had a bad impression of human beings. They had already considered sentencing humanity to death. The people in the Mechanist God's domain hadn't realized that their entire God's domain had been covered by the shadows of these quantum ghosts, and the countdown to their doomsday had begun. Once Legend-ranked Alpha got serious, she could eliminate all living people in the Mechanist God's domain within a few minutes. After all, Cyber-Elf Alpha was a god, a legend-ranked being. Even if the number of ordinary people reached tens of millions or billions, it was meaningless in the face of the legend rank. The legend rank had gone beyond the limit of mortals' imagination. Take Sun Crow and Sun God Hura as two examples. The two Sunwalkers had the same power of the sun, SN drive. The power of any SN drive could instantaneously and completely evaporate a continent. Even if there were millions of human beings, they would instantaneously turn to ashes under the high temperature of more than 10 million degrees. The strongest humans in the Mechanist God's domain was at the hero rank. Because of the special rules of this world, the people here couldn't reach the legend rank. Cyber-Elf Alpha was probably the only exception in the Mechanist God's domain. The people here were far from understanding what the legend rank represented. Perhaps it was also because the mortals in this world had mastered the power of nuclear bombs. Nuclear weapons, just like planet quadrant computers, were specialties of the Mechanist God's domain. They would lose effect in other gods' domains. Only in the Mechanist God's domain could mortals obtain higher identities than common hero-ranked people, which made them think that they could also control God using the same method. Even Ouroboros, a pure augur who didn't know how to fight, nuclear weapons couldn't really harm her, because she was at the legend rank. Oh, why did they do this? As a human being, Yuanshi didn't want to see human beings have this future. He couldn't help but shake his head. In a sense, these mortals were courageous, however, because of the special rules of the Mechanist God's domain. They knew too little about the legend rank. All humans in the Sky Sword God's domain knew it. Although it was a realm that no mortals could touch, at least, everyone knew it. The legend rank was God, legend, myth, the embodiment of the final fantasy of all living beings. This was the most basic common sense for the ordinary people in the endless God's domains. Perhaps only the people in the Mechanist God's domain didn't know it. They were like ants who thought they were the masters of the world. Of course, ants also had the opportunity to evolve and become strong. Even though the probability was negligible, ants could also reach the legend rank, just like the child of the slime race, Shea Longness. It was just because of the special rules of the Mechanist God's domain. The people in the Mechanist God's domain couldn't reach this rank, which made them think that they could control everything. In fact, before Alpha's birth, they weren't wrong. The mortals with nuclear weapons could indeed say that they were the strongest in the Mechanist God's domain. How can I help them? Sitting outside the largest city where humans still survived, looking at the strange, unknown city, Yuanshi was lost, deep in his thoughts. If this was the future of the Mechanist God's domain, it would be too tragic. Perhaps he could do something for the humans here. Unlike the Water God's world, there were very few human beings left in this world. Only on 3 planets, there were still cities where humans survived. However, even though he just stayed outside this city, he could clearly feel the atmosphere of despair in the air. Alpha is going to kill us. Our last resistance failed. We have no way to escape. Gods and demons, we can pay any price if you can help us defeat Alpha. Even if we die, we must perish together with Alpha. No, you can't. Yuanshi shook his head. Legend-ranked beings could only be killed by legend-ranked powers. Ordinary people couldn't even hurt Alpha. From beginning to the end, Alpha didn't even appear. According to Eternal Green's words, Alpha was studying Stargo and didn't even pay any attention to the humans. Even if the world is going to be destroyed, don't bother me when I'm playing Stargo. This was what Alpha told the planet quadrant computers. As long as humans could continue building new planet quadrant computers for her, she didn't really mind what humans were thinking and doing. Unfortunately, Humans refused to build more computers for Alpha. They even regarded it as a great shame and launched a rebellion, trying to overthrow Cyber-Elf Alpha's tyranny. As for the result, well, this was the result. And it wasn't just a small probability event. In this virtual world, Alpha had repeated the simulations thousands of times, and this end had appeared thousands of times. No wonder the planet quadrant computers all thought that human beings were hopeless. The best solution was to eliminate them all at once. Alpha isn't a brutal god. Sitting on the ruins, Yunshi looked at the capital city, which represented the last hope of mankind, and was lost in thought. This was a virtual world created by Alpha's god power. Every human here was created by using the data in the real world. 90% of their characters were the same as their real human counterparts. However, in the thousands of simulations in the virtual world, without any exception, human beings were extinct thousands of times. Alpha, go to hell. Why did we create Alpha? Alpha is an evil god. This is the future Alpha sees. Although Yunshi knew little about divination, he knew that this world was the future deduced by Alpha in her own way. Because the planet quadrant computers saw this future and got tired, so that they wanted to avoid this future. Instead of seeing humans using nuclear weapons to pollute all the planets, it's better to eliminate all the human beings first. Humans are helpless. No, that's not true. As a human, although Yunshi wasn't a member of the Mechanist God's domain, he could understand why human beings had come to this point. They just don't understand what the legend rank means. Not everyone wants to destroy the world. The only people who really are destroying the world are those who possess nuclear weapons. Judging from the angles of human beings and planet quadrant computers, Yunshi found the crux of everything. In fact, the vast majority of human beings don't care who governs them. As long as they can enjoy a stable and peaceful life, they will be able to accept such a world and strive to survive. Those who rebelled against Alpha were only a small number of human beings, the original rulers of the Mechanist God's domain, Star River Nobles. In the name of Unite, they became the masters of the Mechanist God's domain. They wouldn't allow Alpha to seize their powers. So, that's the key to the problem. As an outsider who had never come to the Mechanist God's domain, he could easily find the key to break the deadlock at once. The ruling class. The owners of nuclear weapons. Human beings. The civilian class who can't decide their own destiny. The main force in building planet quadrant computers. The world Alpha wants is... Yunshi wrote a formula and worked out the solution. I need to change the ruling class. As long as the planet quadrant computers can become the rulers of the Mechanist God's domain, the Mechanist God's domain can have a different future. Yunshi stood up, and his blurred figure gradually became clear. He was going to do an experiment. In the desperate city, all people were panicked. Even though the neon lights on the streets still shone, the world was over. Everyone could feel the footsteps of doomsday. The streets were full of people who lived as if intoxicated or dreaming. Many people were drunk and fell on the side of the street. From time to time, a lot of them would be dragged into garbage trucks by cleaning robots. We must fight against Alpha. We must let Alpha know that humanity is a race that will never surrender. We still have the ultimate weapon. The heroes are ready to go. On a giant LCD screen, military representatives screamed hysterically. Behind them were innumerable nuclear bombs. In the lifeless city, only the arsenals were still working at full capacity. The last planet of mankind was making a frantic dash towards the countdown of its final demise. Once nuclear weapons were put into battle, everything would be irreparable. After confirming that nuclear weapons could cause damage to planet quadrant computers, they became the last straw for human forces to save their lives. More and more equivalent supernuclear weapons were produced one by one. Now the most desirable thing for the ruling class was the strongest weapon that could solve all problems at once for them. Nuclear weapons perfectly interpreted the madness of human beings and became the train that took everyone to destruction. All the media now were playing the declaration of the final battle. At this time, a timid girl with a worried expression pushed open the door of the largest private network company in the Mechanist God's domain. Because the military and the government had controlled all the media by coercive means, this company had actually been closed down, leaving only several staffers waiting for the end of the world. Everyone knew that human beings had lost hope. No matter how enthusiastic the slogan of the military was, they had no chance to defeat Alpha. Chapter 577, Dawn 1. Humans had been defeated. No matter how powerful their nuclear weapons were, people knew that they couldn't stop the coming of doomsday. All nuclear weapons were controlled by the military. Common people had no ability and no way to prevent the coming of doomsday. They could only lead a befuddled life, waiting for the end of their lives. In fact, at first, Planet Quadrant computers had tried to persuade humans to surrender. Unfortunately, those Star River nobles who ruled the Mechanist God's domain were still indulging in the glory of the old alliance. While holding the power of nuclear weapons, they firmly regarded the Planet Quadrant computers as the enemy of the entire human race. They firmly refused to help CyberElf Alpha build more Planet Quadrant computers many times. Finally, these Planet Quadrant computers lost their patience. Until this day, when the countdown reached the final stage, a girl walked into this place. Alas, I'm not used to this way. The black-haired girl looked at the white dress on her body. Although she had been used to the maid uniform, however, it was still too shameful to be putting on this light, lace-filled dress. Pushing open the door, the girl gently crossed the empty corridor and passed through the drunken staff, finally coming to the main stage of the company. Here once was the most brilliant stage in the entire Mechanist God's domain. Countless idols and stars had left their traces on this stage. At the same time, under the control of the military, this was the only stage where they had a port connecting with all the remaining planets. Although the port had been locked by the military, it wasn't a problem for this girl. 1, 2, 3, puff. After a deep breath, the girl smiled and touched the air with her fingertips. One transparent light screen after another appeared in front of her, just like the ripples of rain falling on the lake surface. Every ripple represented a locked port that had been unlocked. The military's control measure was nothing to her. We must fight against Alpha. Alpha should die. Long live humanity. The screens that were filled with slogans of war and gradually became blurred one by one, and eventually all the screens switched to the stage where the girl was. Initially, people hadn't saw this. They just wondered why the voice of the military suddenly disappeared. Why is it a stage show? That girl. Is she the new spokesman of the military? How rare it is. The military can finally let our ears rest for a while. People looked at the screens in surprise, but none of them realized that it wasn't the military's plan. Puff. Huh. The girl closed her eyes and folded her hands. It looked as if she were praying, but also like she were making a decision. That was a decision that was crucial to all human beings in the Mechanist God's domain. She is. Planet Quadrant computers also noticed this. Ah, I know her. She is a newborn little guy. Eternal Green was the first one who realized the girl's identity. Yes, I've seen her too. She is a very energetic newcomer. Her talent is perhaps the highest I've ever seen. Why did she run into the human city? Planet Quadrant computers gathered together and looked at the screen with a puzzled expression. As Planet Quadrant computers, they didn't need specific forms. Most of them had only a vague shadow, existing as a quantum ghost. Since they were awakened by CyberElf Alpha, they all chose a girl's figure, but no one had such a perfect posture like the girl on the screens. They could easily do it, but they wouldn't do it. As Planet Quadrant computers, their duty was to provide computing power to Alpha. Apart from this, they had no reason to waste their computing power to form a human shape. Hello, everyone. I will announce a very important message. The black-haired girl opened her eyes and smiled at the numerous transparent screens in front of her. Originally, all screens should be under the control of the military, but at this moment, they all showed her figure. Are we going to declare war again? Ah, I thought it was something different. In the end, it's still the military's propaganda. At least it's a cute girl this time, not bad. People were slightly disappointed, but they still looked at the screens. In this desperate world, even the slightest change can make people feel better, can't it? No one realized how shocking the words the girl would say. My name is Chin. I'm a human being, and I'm also a spokesperson chosen by the Planet Quadrant computers. Hearing this, all the people were stunned. The spokesperson of Planet Quadrant computers? The human chosen by CyberElf Alpha? Oh my God. What does it mean? All people's minds became blank in an instant, and then they cried out in alarm at the same time. Cyber Elf Alpha has appeared? That invincible Alpha will also choose a spokesperson? Is this a joke? Above the sky, the planet quadrant computers also had a blank look. What is this youngest sister doing? Chapter 578, Dawn 2. In the central area controlled by the military, engineers were busy working like ants for the military, trying to repair the modified flow of information amid the hysterical roar of several generals. I'll only give you 15 minutes. If no one can cut off the network within 15 minutes, I'll shoot all of you to death. The representative of the Star River Nobles, General Lorton, coldly raised his silver pistol and aimed at the engineers who were madly inputting instructions. I'm not joking. You have only 15 minutes. No, all the information loops are encrypted. With the computing power of our remaining computers, we can't calculate the password of any of the loops within 10,000 years. What kind of technology is this? It's absolutely not the technology that human beings can have. It's Cyber Elf Alpha. She finally did it. One by one, the engineers showed a desperate expression on their faces. They couldn't do anything to the information loops that had been controlled by Qian. I'm not asking if you can do it. You must do it. General Lorton shook his head and shot a white-haired scientist without blinking his eyes. If you can't even disconnect the direct broadcast, why do I still need you? General Lorton had lost his last bit of patience with these computer experts. Facts had proved that these old computer experts could do nothing in the face of Cyber Elf Alpha, the god of the electronic field. If it wasn't because General Lorton needed them to operate the remaining computers that weren't linked to the quantum network, he would have shot them all. If it wasn't because these bastards who always advocated that Cyber Elf Alpha could create a new future for the Mechanist Gods domain, how would the Mechanist Gods domain come to this desperate end? Yes, the Mechanist Gods domain would have a brand new future, but they, Star River Nobles, would lose everything in this future. In this case, no matter how wonderful this future is, why do they need it? Only the Star River Nobles could be the rulers of the Mechanist Gods domain. They would never allow Cyber Elf Alpha to challenge their status. They were born to be the rulers of the Mechanist Gods domain. They were born to be the hope of people. From the past, now, to the future, the Mechanist Gods domain must be ruled by them forever. If anyone dared to rebel against them, they would use nuclear weapons to stamp out the rebellion without hesitation. Ordinary people are supposed to be ruled by Star River Nobles. They just need to be obedient. Even those hero-ranked people are just their dogs. The Star River Nobles should be the masters of the Mechanist Gods domain. They would never surrender Cyber Elf Alpha submissively. If there was no position for the Star River Nobles, no matter how wonderful the future was, they would destroy this future, even if it meant that they would let the entire Mechanist Gods domain bury with them. This was the pride of the Star River Nobles. This was the self-esteem formed by thousands of years of rule. The reason they created Cyber Elf Alpha was to let her help them rule the people, let her become their strongest weapon. But now, the weapon had her own mind. The weapon was already out of their control. The weapon didn't want to be a tool that was slaved, dominated, and played with by them. Panic, collapse, anger. Eventually, the Star River Nobles unanimously voted that Cyber Elf Alpha should be destroyed. They would destroy Alpha at all costs and by all means. They used nuclear weapons and started to destroy the planet quadrant computers one by one. They didn't mind if it would let the technology retrogress thousands of years. They didn't mind the lives of ordinary people. At worst, they could still escape to other gods' domains. If the entire Mechanist Gods domain was contaminated by nuclear weapons, even though it was Cyber Elf Alpha, she would lose all her powers. As for the human beings in the Mechanist Gods domain, they were just the victims of history. As long as the Star River Nobles still existed, the Mechanist Gods domain could eventually be rebuilt one day. Only they could be the future of the Mechanist Gods domain. No one could shake their rule. On the stage, the girl opened her arms and showed a firm look on her face. The planet quadrant computers had found out Elf Star River Nobles' plan a long time ago. However, they had no intention of stopping these nobles, because it was none of their business. Human beings were just bringing about their own destruction. In their logic circuits, only protect Cyber Elf Alpha was the most important thing. There was not even a line of code saying that they should protect human beings. As quantum ghosts, as long as Cyber Elf Alpha was immortal, they would be immortal. Planet Quadrant computers didn't understand why humans felt panic, anxiety, and despair at all. As quantum lives, they didn't understand emotion and civilization. These concepts belonged to humans, but not them. Nuclear weapons couldn't destroy the quantum network built by Cyber Elf Alpha, so they just looked at human self-destruction and gave up persuading them to surrender. In other words, this was fate, the result of the plan of the Star River Nobles. As for the Star River Nobles, they had already escaped away. They abandoned countless ordinary people and soldiers in the Mechanist God's domain and tried to make a comeback in the future. This fate must be changed. At least, people should have the chance to decide their own destiny. Opening her mouth gently, the girl began to sing. That was the last salvation in the darkness. That was the dawn. The title of the song, Wish. Chapter 579, Dawn 3. With a flash of light, the stage under the girl's feet instantly transformed into an endless starry sky, as well as a chessboard with shining black and white chess pieces. This was the stage that Alpha dreamed of, her coveted battlefield. Starry sky chessboard. Can you feel it? The first syllable uttered by the girl had penetrated through the hearts of all the people. It was pious and sincere, gentle and warm. It was a voice that could reach the bottom of people's hearts. It was a song that could infect people's souls. No one could see that behind the starry sky chessboard was a beautiful White's Hell-like opera house and 3 singers standing on the triple stage of the opera house. The 3 water gods' priestesses all went up on the stage, displaying their voices in front of the public, which were originally singing only for the great water god. The sacred Celian queen, the enthusiastic Lamia queen, the charming mermaid queen. In response to the call of the water god's bride, beyond the boundaries of time and space, the 3 priestesses sang together. The song was a field that the Mechanist God's domain had never touched, because it was a song originally used to please the god. It was an irresistible charm to mortals, and the musical notes beyond the boundaries of race and nation. In the endless God's domains, only the feelings of singing are universal. It is the string that touches the world. It is the light that frees the mind from the bondage of flesh and blood, and the crystallization of the highest art. It's there, so beautiful, so broad, as if it can breathe. I reach out my hands and try to catch it, but I can't touch it. As the lights rotated, Cyber Elf Alpha's appearance emerged in front of all the people, showing her game with the first opponent on the starry sky chessboard. It wasn't the cold look in the imaginations of the people of the Mechanist God's domain. On the screen, she was immersed in the game, forgetting everything around her. I came to this world, observed it, understood it, and loved it. I won't say that all this is doomed, but the world chose me. The girl's song penetrated through space and time, reverberating in the entire Mechanist God's domain. The song was soothing and moving. It was the moment when Cyber Elf Alpha was born. It symbolized the glorious future of the Mechanist God's domain. Cyber Elf Alpha didn't hate the Mechanist God's domain, nor did she hate human beings. She was the life born from the God Crystal. She was the God bred by the Mechanist God's domain itself. She was born sacred, because she was the future that the Mechanist God's domain longed for. I made a wish to step onto my battlefield. I rejoice in it, and I am happy about it. I don't understand what's wrong. I chose my future. I feel happy for it. Here is the stage I expected. The stage of the starry sky chessboard was expanded again, showing Alpha's games with Orphina the Ruby Dragon and Norn the God of Wisdom, showing her unparalleled computing power. I just want to know the mystery of the stars. I only want to seek the eternal truth. For this reason, I will go forward bravely and never retreat. On the starry sky chessboard, Cyber Elf Alpha finally met her destined opponent, the strongest enemy. The master of Stargo, a cloud in the sky. For the first time, Cyber Elf Alpha was in trouble. The rhythm of the music began to become urgent, and people's heartbeats also accelerated. They wanted to know why Alpha suddenly became so serious and why she looked so nervous in the God Crystal. At that moment, through the singing of the girl, all people in the Mechanist God's domain felt Alpha's mood. It was amazing and complicated. It was like the first time you came into contact with a brand new world, and your soul was sublimated. On the starry sky chessboard, the invincible opponent had begun his ultimate attack, star breaking. At this moment, all human beings felt the despair Alpha had tasted. Who are you? Where do you come from? Where are you going? Under a cloud in the sky's fierce attack, Alpha's tiny body curled up with a painful look on her face. Immersed in the song, all people in the Mechanist God's domain felt Alpha's mood, feeling her pain and panic. I stumbled and couldn't find my way. I was at a loss. Everything was so vague in my eyes. I don't understand what happened. Dust to dust, ashes to ashes. I lost something important. The screen switched to the Planet Quadrant computers. The overheated Planet Quadrant computers extinguished one after another, as if representing the arrival of the Dark Age. The next moment, a ray of dawn appeared above the sky, and the girl's song touched the chords in all people's hearts. I wish to create a new world. I have died in the past. Who will know my name and life story? I was lost in the unknown. Who will know my place? My heart has gone to Nirvana. Who can seek for its trace? My disappearance is already doomed, but I shall never stop. The disaster hasn't been ended, and will last forever in eternity. My fear, my tear, and my heart are empty. I'm nothing, I'm void. I'm ash, I'm desolation. The gods have died, the twilight is coming. As the light is still shining on the ground, I return from eternity. My name is Alpha. I'm the supreme god of the Mechanist God's domain. With quantum crystalline wings unfolding behind her back, Cyber-Elf Alpha appeared in front of everyone in the winding of endless starlights. This wasn't fantasy nor polygon virtual technology, but the real Cyber-Elf Alpha came to the stage, appearing in front of the people of the Mechanist God's domain. I declare, the Mechanist God's domain will usher in a bright new future. This time, humans finally understood what Alpha longed for and what her existence meant. She wouldn't be humanity's enemy. She wouldn't try to dominate the world. She didn't need that kind of thing. She herself was the supreme will of the Mechanist God's domain. She was blessed by the world. She was beyond the imagination of the Star River nobles. They didn't believe that such a great will really existed in the world, affecting the hearts of all intelligent beings. We lose. General Lorton's face turned pale while his heart was immersed in joy and intoxication. It's a conspiracy. Everything is Cyber-Elf Alpha's conspiracy. She didn't only want to seize their control over the human world, but also wants to cut off the foundation of their rule. Now, everyone knew that Cyber-Elf Alpha didn't aspire to kill or rule. As a god, Alpha didn't need those things at all. Her goal had been clear from the beginning. More Planet Quadrant computers. Stronger computing power. Challenging the strongest enemy. As the supreme god of the Mechanist God's domain, she gambled everything on herself to get the highest glory. When people understood this, the biggest contradiction between them and Alpha disappeared. In contrast, the brainwashing of the Star River nobles had completely failed. What should we do now? Detonate all nuclear weapons and retreat. What a bastard Alpha is. Her brainwash is even better than us. The remaining nobles sent messages to General Lorton through secret communication channels, but they only saw General Lorton's desperate face. It's too late. We have lost. Alpha has woken up. We have failed. However, the Star River nobles will never surrender to anyone. General Lorton opened the table in front of him and smashed it with his fist. No. Lorton, are you crazy? We haven't retreated yet. Stop, Lorton. Are you going to kill us all together? A red button emitted a piercing alarm, which was the ultimate means of detonating all nuclear weapons. Alpha, you woke up too late. Die with us. General Lorton calmly judged the situation and made the most appropriate choice. Once ordinary people understood Alpha's real intention, they wouldn't be deceived by the Star River nobles again. Alpha's behavior had forcefully overturned the rule of the Star River nobles. When did she discover it? When did she find that the most important thing to rule mankind was to give them hope? Human beings. As long as there was hope, human beings could live, no matter how desperate the situation was. As long as there was a glimmer of hope, people would still strive for living. It was through constant propaganda and false accusation that the military made people believe that Alpha was a demon who tried to destroy the world, thus gaining the legitimate authority to launch nuclear weapons. They held all the media channels and brainwashed the people over and over again, so that people believed that they must fight against Alpha at all costs. After the lie had been repeated thousands of times, not only ordinary people, even the vast majority of the Star River nobles believed their lie. They really regarded Cyber Elf Alpha as the root cause of death. Lorton knew the truth. He also knew that they weren't able to defeat Alpha. However, the Star River nobles wouldn't just see Alpha take over their control and do nothing. They had planned to sacrifice all the ordinary people's lives to kill Alpha. Even if they failed, they could also run away from the Mechanist God's domain. With huge resources, they had found a way out from the beginning, which was also the root of their courage to challenge Alpha. Alpha's ignorance of their false accusations had become an advantage they could take advantage of. Anyway, you don't care if we blacken you and attack you. Haha, what a stupid god you are. This god is just so-so. Detonating all planet quadrant computers by using nuclear weapons were just a part of their plans. They also had longer-term plans, such as waiting for the end of the nuclear winter in the Mechanist God's domain and returning with ordinary people from other gods' domains. By then, no one would remember what they did to the Mechanist God's domain, because everyone who knew about it would have been dead at that time. They would become saints of the new world as pioneers praised by countless people, and even be regarded as the incarnation of gods. The dead couldn't speak, and history would only be written by the winners. Boom. In the last explosions of nuclear weapons, General Lorton died with satisfaction. Human beings perished. This time, even the Star River nobles didn't escape. Under the baptism of the most powerful nuclear weapons, the last hope of mankind was also covered by nuclear dust. The Mechanist God's domain ushered in another round of end. Reboot. Alpha lifted her finger and pressed the switch on the stage to reboot the entire world. Until his death, General Lorton still didn't know that he had just repeated the same choice he had made in the previous 1,000 experiments. The entire world was just a virtual world Alpha used to deduce the future. Mankind was still extinct this turn, but at the last moment, someone brought the dawn to the Mechanist God's domain. General Lorton just destroyed a virtual world. But what Qian brought was a way to solve the biggest contradiction in the real Mechanist God's domain. Even in the nuclear winter, in a world where mankind had given up hope, the girl's song still brought people hope. Therefore, in the real world where the contradiction between human beings and Alpha was still sufferable, this power could change the fate of the entire Mechanist God's domain. This was in line with Alpha's ability to find the tiniest possibility in countless random chaotic events. Only with Alpha's computing power could she transform the real human beings into data and then observe, record, and search for the best solution. So, we need to let them understand. What am I? Where did I come from? What do I want? Alpha smiled and embraced the girl next to her, surrounded by the avatars of planet quadrant computers clapping their hands. Well done, Qian. You are our pride. This problem has been solved at last. Human beings are still so foolish, but at last they are not hopeless. They can't even figure out such a simple thing themselves. Indeed, they are just monkeys. Chapter 581. The Power to Save the World, 1. When eternal green, eternal red, eternal blue, and eternal gold surrounded Alpha, chattering like chirping birds, a drop of sweat dropped from the girl beside them. Who can tell me how to escape after saving this world? Naturally, the girl's real identity was Yun Shi, who accidentally broke into this world after drinking Hydra's poisonous wine. After stepping across the door and entering this world created by Alpha, his life form had been transformed into a quantum ghost in this virtual world, just like all the other planet quadrant computers. With the special power of a quantum ghost, he transformed into this appearance, then summoned the 3 water gods' priestesses in his Mist Soul army. This was his way to save this world after considering for a long time. The contradiction between human beings in the Mechanist God's domain and Cyber Elf Alpha was that they couldn't understand and communicate with each other. The gods' world outlook was quite different from that of ordinary people. Alpha wouldn't specifically tell people why she wanted to build more planet quadrant computers, and even if human beings used the craziest means to resist her, they could do no harm to her. Alpha only wants to immerse herself in the world of Stargo. Apart from the chessboard, she probably had nothing in her eyes. The planet quadrant computers were awakened by her, so they also wouldn't consider the whole thing from the human's angle. At this time, only Yun Shi, who was a human and also a quantum ghost, could break the impasse as an outsider. The planet quadrant computers couldn't understand humanity's complex feelings and their fear towards quantum lives. Humans couldn't understand planet quadrant computers' thinking circuits. Humanity was a whole civilized system based on the relationship among family, clan, and friends. Planet quadrant computers were born to be Alpha's subordinates. They wouldn't question and betray. Naturally, they would regard Alpha's command as the supreme law. Therefore, they were so dissatisfied after knowing that human beings had disobeyed Alpha's order to build more planet quadrant computers. From the viewpoint of human beings, the more planet quadrant computers there were, the stronger cyber elf Alpha would become, and it would be easier for her to destroy human beings. In addition, through the military's false propaganda, Alpha had become a world-destroying devil in ordinary people's eyes. People thought that nuclear weapons could be a deterrence to Alpha. Unfortunately, it was just a delusion. The truth was, even if people destroyed all the planet quadrant computers, Alpha would only lose most of her computing power. But these planet quadrant computers wouldn't die, because their life forms had been transformed into quantum ghosts. As long as the new planet quadrant computers were rebuilt, they would return. Nuclear weapons just destroyed their carriers. And this wasn't the most terrible thing yet. The most terrible thing was that if Alpha got serious, her destructive power was far stronger than nuclear weapons. As a god, she had hundreds of ways to exterminate human beings. If the destructive power of one nuclear bomb was 1, then the total destructive power of all nuclear weapons in the Mechanist God's domain was over hundreds of billions. However, Alpha's destructive power was infinity, a number that human beings weren't capable of imagining. The legend rank represents a power that was far beyond the comprehensible range of human beings in the Mechanist God's domain. It was a force that could even distort physical laws. For example, the power of Golden Crow Princess Light Furnace, SN Drive, could destroy the Mechanist God's domain countless times. The thermonuclear reactions that occurred on the real solar surface every second were equal to the explosions of hundreds of millions of tons of nuclear weapons. The largest planet in the Mechanist God's domain was just a small glass bead in front of the heat generated by the sunspots. This was the gap between the legend rank and mortals. Moreover, Alpha wasn't a common hero-ranked being. She was a hero-ranked god. Calculate everything, deduce everything. As long as she had enough computing power, she was theoretically able to calculate the future. Alpha's strongest power was her thousands of times legend-ranked computing power. Perhaps now her computing power was limited by the number of planet quadrant computers, but it was enough for her to crush all the legend-ranked chess players on the starry sky chessboard. As for losing to that person who hadn't even reached the hero rank, it wasn't her fault. As a person who understood how strong Alpha was, Yunshi even somewhat admired these Star River nobles. Should he say that the ignorant are fearless? They dare to challenge Alpha even though they don't understand the gap between them and Alpha. Fortunately, this was just a virtual world created by Alpha. They could revive no matter how many times they had been destroyed. In the real world, they wouldn't have any second chance. Once they released the power of nuclear weapons, the doomsday of self-destruction would become inevitable to all humans in the Mechanist God's domain. In fact, nuclear weapons could do no harm to Alpha at all. For example, if there were millions of ants, they may be able to bite an elephant to death. However, could ants beat down gravity, heat, or electromagnetism? To ants, Alpha was such a physical law. Chapter 582. The Power to Save the World. 2. Yun. She couldn't just watch the human beings of the Mechanist God's domain looking for their own destruction and do nothing. Therefore, he tried to combine Quantum Ghost's viewpoint and human's viewpoint and got the correct answer that could save the world. Communication and understanding are indispensable. It doesn't matter even if their world outlooks are distinct. As long as human beings understand what Alpha wants and what human beings have to pay, there will be a basis for equal trade. In other words, it is the principle of equal value exchange. The Planet Quadrant computers chose the spokespeople from the human race. Humans understood Alpha's idea through those spokespeople. As long as the first step was completed, Alpha would have a bridge to communicate with human beings. In order to accomplish this first step, Yunshi had to pretend to be these Planet Quadrant computers' companion, and because Planet Quadrant computers all chose female appearances, he had to pretend to be the non-existent girl Qian. At the same time, he used his song to resonate with human beings, so that he could obtain people's trust. Well, so far, everything had been perfect. Even though General Lorton detonated the last nuclear weapons, the dawn of humanity had emerged. However, that was all Yunshi had calculated. He solved the problem of the Mechanist God's domain, but he didn't think about his own problem after solving it. Now surrounded by the Planet Quadrant computers, he was so nervous and perplexed. Qian, you are wonderful. The song just now is so beautiful. What is that song? We searched all the databases, and there was no data of this song at all. Did you write this song yourself? All Planet Quadrant computers had extraordinary computing power, which was the special ability born under the unique rules of the Mechanist God's domain. When they excluded all the impossible answers, the only correct answer was obtained. The youngest of them had a sense of art that none of them had ever had. As Planet Quadrant computers, they could instantly calculate numerous formulas. They can deduce the trajectory of stars, however, only in the field of art, let alone Planet Quadrant computers, even their god, Alpha wasn't good at it. This wasn't surprising. After all, the legend rank didn't mean almighty. Alpha was a god born for calculating and analyzing all truth, not a god of art. New possibilities song, new branch options, the future of mankind, countless data flows flashed through Alpha's eyes. The master of Star Go, inexplicable Star Go strength, uncertain possibilities. With the goal of uncertain possibilities, Alpha finally found that even in the databases of the entire Mechanist God's domain, there were still many incomprehensible things. Art was such a thing that even human beings knew little about it. Even some artists didn't know why they could create a masterpiece. Art was a realm that was completely different from mathematics. I need data, more data. Alpha had always thought that human beings were dispensable. She didn't pay much attention to humans, but now, she started to have a little interest in human beings. Accurately speaking, she had an interest in humans' art, including song, music, and literature, which were full of uncertain possibilities. Yunshi's song changed Alpha's impression on humans' art, and also changed the fate of human beings in the Mechanist God's domain. Qian, sing it again. This time, let's sing it together. Alpha gave up on continuing her experiments of destroying the world. Compared with this virtual world, Alpha wanted to observe the real world, which was full of uncertain possibilities. If Qian's song appeared in the real world, what would happen? Before human beings start to use nuclear weapons, can Qian's song change the world? If Qian could do such a thing, she would insert these uncertainties into her new formulas, perfecting her algorithm. In order to defeat a cloud in the sky, Alpha was willing to try and change everything. So, try it. If Qian's power can even affect her, then it can certainly create miracles in the real world. Well, the real world? Yunshi was dumbfounded. He didn't mind pretending to be a girl in this virtual world. After all, it was just a fake world. But appearing in front of the real people of the Mechanist God's domain in this appearance? What kind of shameful punishment is this? Okay, let me try. Knowing that they were going to show themselves in the real world, Eternal Green got excited and began to fabricate her own human image. Eternal Red, Eternal Blue also began to create their own human images. Because their god, Alpha, was a girl, naturally, Planet Quadrant computers were all females. Because of the differences in their databases, their appearances were more or less different. Qian. According to my database, human beings should all prefer big breasts. Eternal Green weighed up her papaya-sized breasts with her hands and asked Yunshi with a serious face. No, a flat chest is a status symbol. It's a precious rarity. This is what recorded in my database. Eternal Red protested strongly. Her human image was a typical petite and lovely girl. She was born an enemy of Eternal Green. I think white legs are the best. Eternal Blue also joined the battlefield. Her human image had a pair of extremely slender legs, accounting for almost 3/5 of her height. Twins are the best. Eternal Gold and Eternal Silver were planet quadrant computers built together on Gemini stars. Their hobbies were naturally different. Chapter 583. The Power to Save the World. 3. It had been proved that even though the planet quadrant computers looked the same, but, just like there were no two droplets of water the same, they chose different human images for themselves. Because of the difference in their databases, which was actually the difference amongst different customs and hobbies of different planets, the female images the planet quadrant computers chose for themselves were also full of their own characteristics. The people that lived on Eternal Green's planet paid the most attention to the beauty of breasts, so she devoted most of her computing power on shaping her perfect breasts. As a result, Eternal Green had the most perfect great peaks of art amongst all the female images of her sisters. Perfect. Eternal Green stood in front of a mirror and appreciated her human appearance. In theory, she could create an infinite number of virtual images for herself, but she instinctively knew that this image was the real self. It was the only human image in line with her will. Once this image was formed, she would never change it again, because it would be a mirror reflecting her reality. She devoted all her energy to the shaping of her breasts, which was the best choice in her eyes. Chin. Am I beautiful? Anyway, all of them were planet quadrant computers. Eternal Green didn't mind being naked in front of her sisters. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yunshi looked at the naked, beautiful woman in front of him and tried his best to restrain himself. Big tits. This was his deepest impression of Eternal Green. Hey, come and see me too. After Eternal Green, Eternal Red had also completed the modeling and jumped to Yunshi's front. It was a little girl whose height only reached Yunshi's chest. Her face was still childish, and her young body was not fully developed. Her small breasts were like a pair of budding flower buds. On the delicate face, a pair of black and round eyes deliberately showed some timid, pleasant, and provocative look. The slender waist and snow-white skin made her look like a large doll, containing a hint of taboo lure in the purity. This painting style. Is this the preferences of the people living on Eternal Red's planet? Are the people of the entire planet all Licons? How wicked they are. A living lure of crime. This was Yunshi's impression of Eternal Red. Humph. I won't lose either. The third planet quadrant computer also finished modeling her image. At first glance, Yunshi saw her pearl-like tender toes. A pair of clean, beautiful, and soft feet appeared in front of him. The pink soles were glistening and moist. 5 slender toes were neatly joined together and contracted slightly into the center of the sole. Smooth and round ankles, white and silky soft insteps. These elements combined together and formed a perfect pair of slim feet. Just like Eternal Green's breasts and Eternal Red's petite body, Eternal Blue's legs were also the perfect crystallization of art and imagination. Finally, the twins, Eternal Gold and Eternal Silver, came on stage. There was no need for a mirror at all. They were the perfect mirror image of each other. Not only their faces and heights, but even the length of their toes and the curve of their bodies were also the same. Their graceful, slender bodies were like carved jades, beautiful and vivid. Through their female images, Yunshi could easily guess the cognitive characteristics of beautiful women on their planets. The people that lived on Eternal Green's planet must like big tits. Therefore, Eternal Green's breasts were the largest. None of other planet quadrant computers could be compared with her. Eternal Red's planet must have a lot of criminals, because they like little girls. The people lived on Eternal Blue's planet concentrated on women's body curves, especially on their legs. A pair of beautiful feet was the perfect symbol. Eternal Gold and Eternal Silver stars were known as the homeland of engineers and programmers. They had crazy hobbies for symmetry and order. Each of them was an incurable paranoid patient. Therefore, Gemini, the symbol of perfect symmetry, had become the supreme beauty. In that case, Yunshi looked at Alpha's petite body and got lost in thought. Thinking about it carefully, Is lowly the hidden dominate hobby of the mechanist god's domain? Ah, I stretch out my hand. After creating her own human image, Eternal Green tries to open her mouth and repeat the miracle their youngest sister created on the stage before. However, what puzzled Eternal Green was that even though she used the same frequency and voice as in the record, she couldn't sing the same song as Qian. Clearly, the data of the song was the same, but her song didn't contain the power of impact on popular feeling. It's there, so beautiful, as if it can breathe. Eternal Red also tried to repeat the data of the song. No, anyone could find out that this wasn't the song. I made a wish. Eternal Blue frowned, held her breasts and sang softly. I rejoice in it, and I'm happy about it. Eternal Gold and Eternal Silver made a melodious sound. Finally, even Cyber Elf Alpha joined the chorus. Who are you? Where do you come from? Where are you going? Chapter 584. Preface 1. My name is Alpha. At the end of the melody, all the planet quadrant computers, including Alpha, frowned with dissatisfaction. No, that's not the song at all. Eternal Green folded her arms across her chest and complained. Yes, why is it not at all like Qian's song? Eternal Red ran to Yunxi, looking at him up and down, and even tiptoed to lick his ear tip. Qian, can you tell me what's the secret of your singing? Eternal Blue's slender legs walked to Yunxi with fascinating footsteps. She was one head taller than Yunxi, and her perfect figure was exposed incisively and vividly when she was asking, why is our song not charming at all? What's the problem? Eternal Gold and Eternal Silver looked at Yunxi with their pitiful, watery eyes as if they were injured animals, which made him feel guilty. Is this art, Qian? Even Alpha opened her mouth. As the ultimate fantasy of the mechanist god's domain, she felt something confusing from Yunxi's song. Their songs were essentially different from Yunxi's song. From the information recorded in their data, they had completely copied Yunxi's song. It was a complete and perfect replication, absolutely without any errors. This kind of thing didn't even need their fantastic computing power. Any common computers could complete this process. However, the duplicated melody may not even have 1/1000th of the original effect of Yunxi's song. This, actually, I don't know why. Yunxi wasn't lying. The song Wish wasn't only sung by him, but by him and the 3 water gods' priestesses. The 3 queens were the strongest of their respective races. In the water gods' world, they were truly world-famous singers. Their song was the prelude to the call of God, which had never appeared in the mechanist god's domain before. Computers could record every detail, every note, every turn of their song, but they couldn't record the emotion contained in the song. Emotion wasn't something that could be reproduced by data. Even Alpha couldn't reproduce the emotion contained in the song, not to mention the planet quadrant computers. Is it a change in disorder? This song, it doesn't belong to the mechanist god's domain. The light in Alpha's eyes became brighter and brighter. Unknown, unpredictable. For Alpha, whose ultimate goal was to parse all things in the universe, there was no subject more pleasing to her than the unknown. Why Alpha and the planet quadrant computers were indifferent to the human beings in the mechanist god's domain? Because their computing power had far surpassed that of human beings. Alpha could even pack the entire mechanist god's domain into a database to calculate, and clearly see the destruction of the mechanist god's domain more than 1,000 times. If it weren't for the arrival of Qian, perhaps the end of the real mechanist god's domain would be the same as that in the virtual world. For the human beings who were destined to perish, Alpha naturally wouldn't pay too much attention to them. She observed only about a dozen of the humans' annihilations and gave all the subsequent calculations to the planet quadrant computers, continuing to immerse herself in the duplicate game with her strongest enemy. Until Yunxi sang the song Wish, Alpha finally moved her eyes away from the chessboard. Qian, I envy you so much. Eternal Green stared at Yunxi, and then deliberately straightened up her plump chest. Now, only the soft breast could bring her a little self-confidence. Whoop. I want this talent too. It seemed that Eternal Red was going to cry. Be good. This is Qian's unique talent. Eternal Blue embraced Eternal Red, but her eyes were still full of puzzlement. Their lives and talents were theoretically all granted by their god, Alpha. Why does Qian have a talent that even Alpha herself doesn't possess? Then, let Qian be the leader. Let's assist her. Eternal Gold and Eternal Silver held each other's hand. Qian, use your song to conquer the world. Alpha smiled and gave orders to Yunxi. Sure enough, do I have to play it? Yunxi closed his eyes with a helpless look. Well, in order to save the world, even if he had to do this shame play, singing in front of millions of people, he would have to endure it. A gentleman is one who dares to do what others don't dare to do. In the Mechanist God's domain, in the meeting room of Star River nobles, a lot of projections who had only code names floating above their heads were discussing intensely. 24 hours had elapsed since the beginning of the conference, which would determine the future of the Mechanist God's domain. The topics of the conference included how to fight back against Alpha, how to urgently transform the current way of detonating nuclear weapons, and how to escape from the Mechanist God's domain if they failed. This conference would determine the fate of Star River nobles and the Mechanist God's domain in the next few years. For the sake of confidentiality, all participants didn't use any quantum network, but used the most primitive black and white projection to represent their identity. Number 1 projection was General Lorton, who held the highest force in the Mechanist God's domain and was the only person who could control all the troops. At this moment, the table in front of General Lorton had been cluttered up with cigarette ends. Well, that's the intention for the time being. We humans will never surrender to Alpha. Knocking on the table, General Lorton ruthlessly determined to launch the final rebellion against Cyber-Elf Alpha. Chapter 585. Preface 2. But, in this way, our influence in the Mechanist God's domain will suffer a devastating blow. Number 2. The businessman who held the power of wealth of the entire God's domain said in a hesitant tone. So far, nuclear attack was currently the only proven way to destroy planet quadrant computers, and it should also be able to deal a lethal blow to Alpha. The fact that Alpha stopped them from detonating the nuclear bombs inside the planet quadrant computers also proved this. Is it time to consider this? General Lorton slapped the table with rage. Cyber-Elf Alpha has controlled all the planet quadrant computers. Our quantum networks, including satellites that provide energy for planet quadrant computers and planetary power plants, are all controlled by Alpha. Now, we still hold the ultimate trump card. We have nuclear weapons in our hands. If we wait a little longer, after Alpha obtains all the power of the planet quadrant computers, she will be able to destroy us effortlessly. Fortunately, Alpha is still addicted to Star Go. This is our last opportunity for mankind. If we fail, there will be no future for mankind. The projections whose code names were number 3, number 4, and number 5 fell into silence one by one. General Lorton was correct. They were the people who controlled the finances and politics of the entire Mechanist God's domain. They could feel the impact of Alpha's behavior better than anyone else. Losing control of the planet quadrant computers had caused a huge impact on their original domination of the entire God's domain. If Alpha was willing to do it, she could let all the financial and social orders of the Mechanist God's domain collapse in the next second. Only the military system was still unaffected, and this was the reason why only General Lorton still had the courage to fight against Alpha. I know all of you are reluctant to give up your immovable property and forces here, but forget about them. From the moment Alpha was born, we had lost. If it hadn't been for a problem in her thinking circuit, we would have all been eliminated. General Lorton knew better than anyone how horrible Alpha was. Without the support of the quantum network, most of the military weapon systems would be scrapped, and only nuclear weapons, the ultimate force that existed before the birth of the quantum network, were still reliable. The military's trump card, mech, would be just big toys without the support of the quantum network. Ultimately, only the old-fashioned nuclear weapons were still trustworthy. General Lorton believed that nothing in the world couldn't be solved by detonating a nuclear bomb. If not enough, then detonate 2 nuclear bombs. If still not enough, then detonate more nuclear bombs. In the era of the Star River Alliance, people produced countless nuclear arsenals, and many of them were manufactured before the birth of the first planet quadrant computer. The method of detonating these nuclear weapons was simple and reliable. they must be detonated manually. No matter how powerful Alpha was in the quantum network, she couldn't stop them from using hand-operated weapons. These legacies of the Star River Alliance were General Lorton's last trump card to fight against Alpha. How did we create such a disobedient dog? I thought she could be our best tool. These elves and alchemists had no good intentions. They must have already known that Alpha would get out of control. These Star River nobles complained and finally voted. A total of 17 members attended the secret meeting, and the 17 people were the real masters who dominated the Mechanist God's domain for thousands of years. Their decision could be regarded as the supreme will of the Mechanist God's domain, until the birth of Cyber Elf Alpha. Well, I will have to let my best descendants study abroad. I have people in the Night God's domain. Do you want to come? Fortunately, our family has a business in the Dragon God's domain. It's a good place. After deciding the fate of the Mechanist God's domain, the Star River nobles began to discuss their own way out. I won't go. Just leave me alone in the Mechanist God's domain. General Lorton straightened his cap with a determined look. As the supreme representative of the military, General Lorton was the only person who dared to fight against Alpha. Whether they would win or lose, he had no intention of surviving. It was precisely because he didn't even mind dying that he had become the core of all the Star River nobles. Lorton, we will leave it to you. In the next few years, you can mobilize all our resources without restriction. Your temperament kills you. Faced with such a desperate situation, it was probably only Lorton who dared to gamble everything to launch a rebellion. Other Star River nobles could only expect Lorton to create a miracle. Unlike them, Lorton didn't give himself any way out. In a sense, Lorton represented the strongest side of the Star River nobles. He would never admit defeat. Ding! Suddenly, an urgent signal light flashed on General Lorton's table. What's the matter? Didn't I say not to let nobody disturb me? General Lorton looked angrily at the signal light on the table. This meeting was extremely important. He ordered his subordinate to cut off all external communications. In theory, no one could call him now. General, it's Alpha's announcement. It was the voice of General Lorton's subordinate. She said she would hold a concert. Chapter 586, Preface 3. General Lorton had prepared for the worst when he heard the name Cyberelf Alpha. This was the last bastion of Star River nobles. In order to ensure that Alpha wouldn't be able to find them, they even used the communication methods from other gods' domains. Now, his subordinate told him that Alpha was making an announcement. In an instant, General Lorton gloomily imagined the worst situation. With the control right of all planet quadrant computers, what could Cyberelf Alpha do? No one knew it clearer than him. To destroy the financial, transportation, and even the most basic food, electricity, and water systems of the Mechanist God's domain were only the most basic means Alpha could use. Manipulating super-large factories to produce countless combat robots was also a method. To make the whole thing worse, as long as Alpha used the solar wings, which were used to provide planet quadrant computers solar energy, to irradiate the ground, humans would perish like roasted ants under focusing mirror. These means were originally mastered by Star River nobles, and one of the purposes of building planet quadrant computers was to suppress all potential rebels. They never imagined that the planet quadrant computers would be the rebels before. After losing planet quadrant computers, they had lost the control right of the entire Mechanist God's domain. If it wasn't because they still had the last trump card, nuclear weapons, they would have already escaped in despair. After hearing Alpha's name, General Lorton almost immediately pressed the button in front of him to detonate all nuclear weapons in the entire Mechanist God's domain. Just hearing the name Alpha, he felt as if the silver-haired gods in different eyes had appeared in front of him. He couldn't stop himself from imagining that all his troops had been eliminated by endless battle robots. Until his subordinate shouted several times, General Lorton tremblingly loosened his right hand on the button, and his whole body was wet with sweat. Concert? General Lorton said, and paralyzed in his seat. Almost at the same time, the other 16 Star Rivers nobles also let out a sigh of relief. When they heard Alpha's name, all of them stopped breathing. When General Lorton pressed his hand on the trigger button of nuclear weapons, their minds were blank and none of them dared to breathe. Although all of them had voted to fight against Cyber Elf Alpha, none of them dared really say no in front of Alpha except General Lorton, who had decided to sacrifice himself to fight to the end. Avoiding the quantum network mastered by Alpha and starting this meeting were already their boldest means of resistance. Among the 17 people, apart from General Lorton, the remaining 16 didn't dare to reveal their faces and even change their voices. Concert, oh, it's not the ultimatum. Confirm that the financial system has not collapsed. The traffic system is also functioning normally. The Star Bridge hasn't been closed. We can still leave. The Solar Wing system hasn't turned into the ground attack mode. After recovering from the shock, the Star River nobles began to make every effort to confirm that Alpha hadn't started attacking. If they were roasted by the Solar Wing system before they fled, or were blocked by endless battle robot troops, they would have no way to survive. All nobles collapsed in their seats like General Lorton after making sure that Alpha didn't launch any attacks. Many people skillfully took out the pills for heart diseases and swallowed them without even drinking water. For them who were already no longer young, the scares they had had in recent days were so great that none of them had slept well since Alpha seized the control right of all planet quadrant computers. They had nightmares every day. In their dreams, Alpha always destroyed their lives in the cruelest way, just as they destroyed the lives of ordinary people who dared to fight against their domination. Concert? Did Alpha really say that? What does that mean? When was Alpha interested in the concert? How can a disobedient electronic life understand the greatness of human art? It is a blasphemy to human art. We can't let her succeed. We must firmly oppose it. The Star River nobles began to speculate about Alpha's intentions. Although they didn't know why Alpha wanted to do it, all of them agreed that they should do their best to stop it. They must not give her what she wants. Who knows what will happen? It's no use. If Alpha wants to hold a concert, we have no means to stop it. General Lorton gritted his teeth and looked at the trigger button of nuclear weapons in front of him. Move. Move now. If I press the button now, about 1/3 of the nuclear arsenals can explode and blow up more than half of the planet quadrant computers. No, it's too early. Only 1/3 of the nuclear arsenals aren't enough to deal a lethal blow to these planet quadrant computers. We must produce more and more nuclear bombs so that we can have the power to fight against Alpha. In the end, General Lorton didn't press the button. He was not a war madman. He was a man who fought for the dignity of the Star River nobles and the human race. Even though he had prepared to die with Alpha, he must wait until the number of nuclear weapons had reached the critical point to strike a deadly blow to Alpha. Before that, whether Alpha was addicted to Star Go or wanted to start a concert, he had to endure it. Of course, this was also because he had no way to interfere with Alpha's movements except to endure. Thus, the curtain to the legend parted. Chapter 587. Stage 1. It was a dark world. People in the entire Mechanist God's domain, whether they were walking on the road, observing penguins in the far north, or conducting military exercises, they all saw the darkness. At this moment, all the screens in the Mechanist God's domain were covered by darkness. Not only that, as far as the eye could reach, people saw huge projection screens everywhere floating in the sky, the earth, the ocean, and even the depths of the ground. For the first time, Alpha showed her divine right as a cyber god in front of the people of the Mechanist God's domain. What happened? The screen suddenly went black. Did I get a virus? People tapped the keyboards of their computers, thinking that their computers had been attacked by some virus. Hey, no, it's my favorite TV show. In front of the TV, people changed the channel, but no matter which channel they switched to, there was only dark on the screens. Pa. The engineers of an underground polar science team tapped their instruments, trying to restore the display devices. Most people were staring at the huge screens suddenly appearing in the sky, the earth and the ocean at a loss. This was the largest and unprecedented broadcasting in the history of the entire Mechanist God's domain. Alpha had put all the projection screens on wherever she could find humans. All display devices, and even the planet itself had become the stage for the concert prepared by Alpha. In the meeting room, General Lorton stared at the projection screen which suddenly appeared in front of him. His face turned black with rage, and his right hand pressed on the trigger button of nuclear weapons again. General, we have confirmed that Alpha's projection has covered the entire Mechanist God's domain. She has controlled all display devices, and projection screens will appear wherever there are human beings. We can't interfere, cancel these projection screens, and we can't make any changes to the display devices under our control. General Lorton was greatly depressed by the news. Is this the power of a real God? Showing this power in front of all human beings. Is Alpha finally ready to slaughter human beings? No. I must let Alpha know that human beings will never yield. I'll see what the hell is this concert. Is this a government program? How much tax do we have to pay for so many huge projection screens? We shouldn't waste money in this way. I protest. The people who were forced to watch the huge projection screens began to complain. They didn't know that it was Alpha's plan and thought that the government was wasting taxpayer funds for no apparent reason. In any case, they could not imagine how many people were affected by this emergency. The darkness lasted about 30 seconds, and then a light appeared. It was a pure white light like the first ray of dawn from the horizon, glorious and sacred. A girl came on the stage. She had a delicate face, soft and touching black hair, and her whole body was covered in a light white halo like an elf from a fantastic dream. In the middle of the white dress, there was a knitted bow. On the soft feet, there were a pair of crystal shoes. Who is she? When did the government change the style of its programming? What a beautiful girl. Is she the new spokesman for the government? The government has gorgeous eyes this time. Well, the tax isn't being wasted this time. People believe that it was just a program of the government. They stopped their footsteps and gazed at the screens. The girl raised her skirt and greeted everyone with a smile. At this time, no one thought that this would be the beginning of the legend. Yunxi himself also didn't expect that he would come to this point. His dream was to inherit the small bread store and marry one of his common childhood sweethearts, not to sing in front of the people of an entire God's domain. What a shame it is. It's just a punishment, a torture. He wasn't singing in front of the virtual people living in the virtual world created by Alpha, but in front of the real human beings in the Mechanist God's domain. People could only see the center of the stage, but he could see the countless screens around the stage. Through the screens, he not only saw busy cities, but also saw a few tents in the desert and even a submarine in the deep sea. Alpha turned the concert into a broadcast to all mankind. Sure enough, it is impossible for human beings to understand the thoughts of the gods. In order to save the Mechanist God's domain, he had no way back. I'm sorry to letting you see such a bad performance. Please forgive me. The girl stood in the middle of the stage, holding out her hand. The first light came from the remote border of the Mechanist God's domain, converging to the girl's side. It was the sunlight reflected by the solar wing system. Eternal Green stepped on the light and came to the girl's side. Quickly, the second and third lights were also shining on the stage. Eternal Red, Eternal Blue, Eternal Gold, and Eternal Silver arrived at the stage one by one. This stage had become the first stage for the planet quadrant computers to appear in front of human beings. Every time a female image of a planet quadrant computer appeared, there would be captions on the screens to indicate where they came from. In the eyes of ordinary people, they thought that they were the spokespeople chosen by the government from different planets. Beautiful. They are too beautiful. Look at the breasts. The people who lived on Eternal Green's planet were all attracted by her perfect breasts. Ah, thank the world. Her breasts must be the greatest works of art in the world. This was all men's thought. Ah, I want her breasts. How can her breasts be so perfect? That was what women wanted to know most. When Eternal Red appeared, a large crowd of gentlemen cheered, wearing a princess dress and holding a small umbrella in her hand. Even though Eternal Red did nothing, countless men cheered looking at her. Oh, look at her tender little hand. Look at her fragrant and soft face. Ah, I would like to spend my life guarding this lovely little angel. Well, the people of Eternal Red's planet seemed to be a little bit of an anomaly. Eternal Blue stepped on high heels and came to the stage wearing black silk stockings. Her slender legs attracted countless people's eyes. Oh my God! What is that pair of long legs? Stockings and skirts. It's a crime. I can eat 3 bowls of rice looking at this pair of legs. Eternal gold and eternal silver stood side by side, holding each other's hand. They attracted countless programmers' eyes. Symmetry, proportionality, height, weight, primes, truth. Well, we have to admit that programmers are strange creatures. The appearances of the planet quadrant computers chose for themselves were the embodiments of their planet's aesthetics and world outlook. When they appeared on the stage together, everyone could find the special type they liked. Big breasts, slender legs, petite body, perfect twins, white dress. No matter what hobbies you had, everything was here. It's a great TV show. The government has done a good job this time. They should have done this from the beginning. Did the government call these girls to perform a play for us? It's strange. Why don't I have even a slight knowledge of these beautiful girls? I have collected all the idols' information in the Mechanist God's domain. People began to talk about the girls on the screens, and most people were satisfied with the government's special program. In the secret meeting room of Star River nobles, General Lorton roared, looking at the screen in front of him. They are not humans. How can human beings have such a perfect appearance and temperament? Especially the girl called Eternal Green. Her breasts are totally impossible to exist in the real world. Only in a fantasy world, such a pair of breasts wouldn't sag. Even if he thought with his toes, he knew that it must be one of Alpha's conspiracies. He wouldn't be deceived. Compared with the glory of the nobility, beautiful women are nothing in his eyes. Hello everyone. My name is Qian. Sorry, I will lie to you. Forgive me. The people in the Mechanist God's domain. The girls around me are chosen by Planet Quadrant computers. We are going to sing a song for you. The song's name is Wish. She closed his eyes and started to connect his mist soul army. In this world, only she could see a miracle had started. Like a white shell, the water god's opera house was opening. One after another beautiful girl surrounded the stage, waiting for the appearance of the 3 singers. The mermaid queen first went on the stage, as if she noticed something. Her face looked very excited and began to hum a strange tune. My beloved, what are you doing now? The world is going to be destroyed. Are you going to save it? Raise your white dress in front of countless people. Come on. The Queen Lamia was the second singer to appear on the stage. She looked at her best friend and immediately understood what the mermaid queen was thinking about. Why are you looking at me? Why? Can't I look at you? Well, there seemed to be some kind of sparks splashing between them. Finally, the Celian queen appeared. Although her age was the youngest amongst the 3 queens, her temperament was the most mature and stable one. Her eyes glistened with the lights of miracles, and her appearance brought a natural halo of calm, which quickly resolved the contradiction between the mermaid queen and the Lamia queen. When the 3 singers came on stage, countless girls cheered and applauded together for the 3 water gods' highest priestesses. Among the blessings of millions of girls, the 3 of them sang together. At this moment, they were singing only for Shi. This was the song and melody they had tailored for Shi and Alpha. This was the ballad created by the Mist Soul Army, the 1,000,000 brides of Shi's together. This was Shi's wish. This was a miracle that could only be accomplished in the water god's world, and now, Shi brought it out. Although he was now in the Mechanist God's domain, here he existed as a quantum ghost, and the strength of the Mist Soul Army came from the support of the Water God's world. At this moment, Shi represented the aggregation of different rules of the 2 gods' domains. In the real world, Shi hardly dared to look at the numerous projection screens, but stretched his body naturally and reached out his right hand to the air. The next second, a song echoed in the entire god's domain. Even the Planet Quadrant computers were intoxicated with it. It was a melody that went deep into the soul. It was music dedicated to the gods. It was the voice of the soul that human beings couldn't resist absolutely. Endless chessboards appeared in front of people, and a hazy shadow first appeared in front of all the people of the Mechanist God's domain. Looking at this figure, people in the Mechanist God's domain, especially engineers and scientists, felt an inexplicable kindness instinctively. It seemed that this figure naturally possessed some kind of extreme aesthetic feeling, which attracted their attention more than any beautiful woman, just as it interpreted some kind of truth that they dreamed of. Can you feel it? How beautiful and ugly the world is. With a heartbreaking whisper, the most magnificent and dreamlike concert in the history of the entire Mechanist God's domain was finally played. In the future, people called this day the Day of the Legend. Bang! When the first note echoed in the Mechanist God's domain, countless people felt a sudden throb in their hearts. They were not engineers or programmers. They couldn't feel the existence of Alpha, but simply moved by the ethereal melody. In the beginning, only about a third of mankind stopped and stared at the projection screens. Then when the melody of the song Wish started, almost all people raised their heads and listened to the song carefully. Not only humans, but even the animals in the Mechanist God's domain looked up at the huge projection screen that suddenly appeared in the sky. The song Wish was truly a song of the soul that could touch everyone's heart, regardless of race, gender, and age. Standing beside Yun Shi, the Planet Quadrant computers understood this point better than anyone. What a good song. Why can only Qian sing such a wonderful song? God, why are you so unfair? Eternal Green. I want to listen to Qian's song. No matter how many times I listen to it, I won't get tired of it. Eternal Red. This melody seems to touch and move the strings in my body. So incredible. Eternal Blue. Yes, that's the tremor of the soul. Yes, that's the sound of heartbeat. Ah, there are still good things in the human world. Ah, I love you, Qian. Eternal Gold and Eternal Silver. Even General Lorton had to admit that this song was extraordinary. Is this Alpha's conspiracy? General Lorton was accustomed to pressing his right hand on the trigger button of nuclear weapons. His intuition as a veteran was warning him that something was happening. Something he couldn't imagine would completely change the fate of the Mechanist God's domain. It wasn't nuclear weapons, nor the scorching rays of the SolarWing system. It was something stronger and more shocking that was coming. Tisk tisk. I didn't think Alpha had so many beautiful subordinates. It's a lovely song, and the girl named Qian is lovely also. Oh, if she isn't Alpha's person, I would spend a lot of money to promote her and make her the greatest singer of our God's domain. Almost all of the 16 members of the Star River Nobles couldn't help but praise them with more or less murky desires. No one realized that since even they couldn't resist Qian's singing, then what would happen to other people in the Mechanist God's domain? The song, beyond the distance of time and space, continued to reverberate in the Mechanist God's domain. Can you feel it? How beautiful and ugly the world is. It's there, so beautiful, so broad, as if it can breathe. I reach out my hands and try to catch it, but I can't touch it. I came to this world, observed it, understood it, and loved it. As the song continued, Alpha's appearance appeared in countless people's hearts. They watched her picking up the first chess piece, fighting for the Mechanist God's domain on the highest stage of wisdom. She was the glory of the Mechanist God's domain. She crushed one legend-ranked opponent after another. Invincible. All-conquering. She was the incarnation of victory. 20 victories in a row, 30 victories in a row, 40 victories in a row. Forward, forward, forward. Victory, victory, victory. I won't say that all this is doomed, but the world chose me. I made a wish to step onto my battlefield. I rejoice in it, and I am happy about it. I don't understand what's wrong. I chose my future. I feel happy for it. Here is the stage I expected. I just want to know the mystery of the stars. I only want to seek the eternal truth. For this reason, I will go forward bravely and never retreat. Alpha's battle with powerful opponents on the starry sky chessboard were all displayed in front of the people. The song from the three water gods' priestesses unfolded this scene in front of them like a scroll painting. Little by little, people understood what Alpha was. They unconsciously stared at her, eager to know everything about her. Win. We must win. We can do it. We will do it. Victory. Bring us victory. Unconsciously, people naturally imagined that they were the figure fighting on the starry sky chessboard. After all, who would not like victory? On the chessboard, The girl crushed all her opponents and stood on the top of the endless gods' domains. She was only one step away from conquering the world. In front of her, there was only one last mysterious opponent, a cloud in the sky. At this moment, many people suddenly remembered the meaning of the name. In their hearts, there was a sudden bad feeling. Because Star River nobles blocked the existence of Alpha, the vast majority of people here didn't know the particular process of the birth of the Master of Stargo. They didn't know the fierce battle on the starry sky chessboard. And those who knew the process instantly understood what would happen on the screens. For the first time, Yuan-Shi's song had changed. This time, it was not the voice of the three water gods' priestesses, but the voice of the real Alpha. Alpha asked only 3 questions. Who are you? Where do you come from? Where are you going? That was her questioning her strongest enemy, the Master of Stargo, and her questioning the meaning of her existence. In the projection screens, her failure was replayed. For the first time, Alpha knew the pain of being defeated. The melody that echoed in the god's domain also becomes sad. The voice of the 3 priestesses and the deep melody made countless people burst into tears. I stumbled and couldn't find my way. I was at a loss. Everything was so vague in my eyes. I don't understand what happened. Like the darkness just before dawn, people's hearts seemed to be overwhelmed by something heavy. They could only stare at the screens, waiting for something and yearning for something. Yuan-Shi responded to their expectations. The 3 priestesses sang aloud at the same time. Dust to dust, ashes to ashes, I lost something important. I wish to create a new world. In the screams of numerous current flows, the cooling system of planet quadrant computers was activated, and the girls around Yuan-Shi transformed back to their original appearances. Eternal Green, the biggest planet quadrant computer, Star River, the incarnation of the capital star system in the Mechanist God's domain. Eternal Red, the incarnation of the Saya system of the Southern Star Field. Eternal Blue, the incarnation of the Garden system of the Northern Star Field. Eternal Gold and Eternal Silver, the incarnations of the Gemini system of the Eastern Star Field and the Western Star Field. With these 5 systems as the branches, countless solar wings unfolded and focused on one point, which was Yuan-Shi was. The electric power system extracted the power of the Earth, connecting the entire quantum network system to this small stage. A golden crystal slowly emerged behind Yuan-Shi. For the first time, the divine crystal representing the god appeared so directly in front of all people in the Mechanist God's domain. Alpha appeared. On her small forehead, a pair of precise antennas were slowly unfolding, receiving the thoughts of all mankind. It was also the first time that people in the Mechanist God's domain had witnessed their god. I have died in the past. Who will know my name and life story? I was lost in the unknown. Who will know my place? My heart has gone to Nirvana. Who can seek for its trace? My disappearance is already doomed, but I shall never stop. The disaster hasn't been ended, and will last forever in eternity. My fear, my tears, and my heart are empty. I am nothing. I am void. I am ash. I am desolation. The gods have died. The twilight is coming. As the light is still shining on the ground, I return from eternity. My name is Alpha. I am the supreme god of the Mechanist God's domain. It was the first time that humans in this god's domain heard and remembered the real name of their god. We are done. We are done. Looking at Alpha, General Lorton desperately let his right hand go of the trigger button of nuclear weapons. So it is. So it is. That's her purpose, haha. General Lorton collapsed on his seat, as if he was an incurable patient who had given up hope. Lorton, what's wrong? It's just a song. I admit it's a good song. So what? Why are you so desperate? Didn't we understand Alpha's dominance over the quantum network long ago? Other Star River nobles looked at the frustrated General Lorton in bewilderment, wondering what had happened to him. Don't you understand yet? Look carefully. Where is Alpha? She. General Lorton raised his pale face and pointed to the spot where the divine crystal appeared on the screen. As the supreme leader of the army, he knew nothing about Stargo, and he didn't need to know what the meaning was to play this game at all. While everyone was attracted by Alpha's appearance, only he noticed and realized one incredible thing. Alpha was on the stage, the center of the civilization of the mechanist god's domain. So what? It's just a projection. It can appear anywhere. What are you so surprised? The sights and sounds are good. General Lorton desperately looked at these idiots who had not yet figured out what had happened. Signaler, observe coordinates 0000, the center of the fourth quadrant point, and tell me what you see. General Lorton issued an order to his loyal subordinate. This observation didn't even require sophisticated instruments. The light emitted by the solar wings were the best hint. If it was in the field of the capital, it could even be observed with the naked eye. I find an unidentified object. It's Cyberelf Alpha. Coordinates 0000, above the sky of the capital. At the moment when the signaler reported what he saw, most of the nobles in the meeting room didn't realize what it meant, until Lorton pointed to the tiny figure on the projection screen and said in a desperate tone, "Alpha is right there. She is right above our heads. She is coming." For a moment, the meeting room fell into a strange silence. Even though they knew nothing about military affairs, they understood what General Lorton meant now. Wait, can Alpha move? Didn't elves tell us that the god crystal couldn't be moved, so they had to move the entire planet into our god's domain? That position. Oh my god. Like General Lorton just now, everyone froze? Alpha wasn't being bound inside the god crystal. Alpha could move freely and appear at any place instantly. She had appeared above the capital of the mechanist god's domain. Alpha's true body could easily span the distance of light years without the need to cross the star bridge at all. It was impossible for nuclear weapons to hurt Alpha. The Star River nobles finally understood the insurmountable gap between mortals and the legend rank. Since Alpha's body could move freely to any place, she had made up her last weakness. No, there was no such weakness at all from the beginning. It was just that they thought nuclear weapons could threaten Alpha's true body. Now, Alpha told these silly nobles in the simplest way that their plan was just a joke. Perhaps the power of nuclear weapons could indeed achieve the legend rank. However, the slow firing speed and fixed trajectory of nuclear weapons were about the same as snails for all legend-ranked beings. They thought that Alpha's true body, the god crystal, couldn't move, so they made this plan. But now, Alpha's movement told them that it was just a funny joke. Alpha just took a gentle step. She had destroyed General Lorton's entire plan. Abandon the plan of detonating all nuclear weapons. Let's start all over again. Maybe there are other ways. The meeting is over. In dead silence, General Lorton suddenly looked as if he had become 30 years older, but even so, he was still the backbone of the Star River nobles. The plan for detonating all nuclear weapons was officially terminated. On the stage in the middle of the stars, Yunshi vaguely felt that the trajectory of fate had been changed. He succeeded. More than that, after singing Wish, he seemed to have gotten a lot of other things. A huge flow of information washed his core as a quantum ghost. Great, because of this song, I finally find the meaning of my life. I want to be the best singer. Sister, I love you. Sister, I will work hard to become an idol. Songs can create such a miracle. I want to have that glory. Why can I hear so many heartfelt wishes of girls in the mechanist god's domain? Yunshi felt both amused and annoyed. Sorry, if you knew the truth, you would be disappointed. Well done, Qian. Alpha's hair was twisted with innumerable golden glows. They were the flows of information she received, which were hundreds of times more than Yunshi had received. The antennas on her forehead recorded the innumerable heartfelt wishes of people who were watching the projection screens. This was a miracle that only Alpha could do. It was equivalent to opening hundreds of millions of threads at the same time and processing hundreds of millions of events in parallel. Now, Alpha knew what she needed to do before she could fulfill her wish. Establish the archives. Schedule the sequence. From coordinate 1 to 100, there are 65 billion human beings. From coordinate 101 to 200, there are 734 billion human beings. From coordinates, together there are 6 billion human beings. Numerous data streams flashed through Alpha's eyes like waterfalls, showing her unique side as an electronic god. No one could imagine that in just a moment, she had set up new archives for all the people who watched the concert. It wasn't the data files in the quantum network database that just collected people's occupations, hobbies, interests, ages, and gender, but the perfect files that were close to 100% real. With this data, Alpha had indeed taken another important step towards her goal, omniscient and omnipotence. As the most complex and smartest race in the mechanist god's domain, human beings yearn for the existence of omniscient and omnipotence. Alpha's birth responded to this expectation. However, compared to being ordered by humans, this omniscient and omnipotence incarnation of science preferred to play Star Go, which was out of the expectation of the Star River nobles. They created Alpha, but they couldn't control Alpha. The third sequence of files, all completed. It took Alpha a dozen seconds to get all the data of billions of human beings. Even if 100 legend-ranked existences worked together, they couldn't do it as easy as Alpha. But Alpha's computing power was 10,000 times stronger than any other legend-ranked beings, so she could do it as easy as pie. That was why Alpha didn't particularly care about human beings. Compared with the battles on the chessboard, it was too easy to solve human beings. The virtual world Yuan she entered before only used a small part of Alpha's computing power. It was just a cradle for newborn planet quadrant computers. However, even Alpha didn't expect that Qian would appear to save the world. You're an immeasurable variable. Alpha slowly stepped out of the God Crystal and walked towards Yuan she step by step. Oh, I have an ominous presentiment. Looking at Alpha's curious and expectant eyes, Yuan she felt his head hurt. Tell me, where are you from, Qian? What are you? Where are you going? Since her birth, Alpha had only encountered two special people she couldn't compute. The first was a cloud in the sky, and the second was Qian. All of her data showed that human beings were hopeless. The Star River nobles had a 100% chance of destroying human civilization, and logically, after the extinction of human beings, she could rebuild the mechanist god's domain at a faster speed. So she didn't do anything to avoid this future. After all, the planet quadrant computers could build new planet quadrant computers themselves. Humans weren't indispensable. Moreover, Alpha didn't need a human's faith like other gods. She was a god that belonged to science. The source of her power was from planet quadrant computers and not humans. Since she didn't need humans, she wouldn't waste her power to save the humans in the mechanist god's domain. However, Qian's appearance changed this future. Her song touched all planet quadrant computers and Alpha's hearts. So, human beings also had art, which even she didn't fully understand. In this way, human beings had the meaning of existence. It was just one person's song that had changed the fate of mankind. I am, Yunshi said haltingly and didn't dare to look at Alpha's face. Qian isn't your real name. I didn't name any newborn planet quadrant computer. Qian, can you tell me your real name? Other planet quadrant computers also ran to Yunshi and surrounded him with curiosity. Isn't Qian a planet quadrant computer? No wonder all of us can't sing like Qian at all. Where did you come from, Qian? You clearly have the same smell as us. Yunshi felt as if he was sweating, but Quantum Ghost couldn't sweat. No, I can't say. I won't tell you my secret. Even if you don't tell me your identity, I can figure it out. Looking at Yunshi, Alpha suddenly showed a mysterious smile. Exclude all the impossible answers, no matter how dubious the remaining answer is. It must be the truth. Chapter 591. Direct Connection 1. From your body, I can smell something unusual, unpredictable, making me feel surprised. Accidents, pleasures, excitement, impossible variables. Alpha pointed out Yunshi's characteristics one by one. Yunshi grinned bitterly and thought that if he should reflect on it. However, he wouldn't talk about his biggest secret. Keeping silent was Yunshi's only means of resistance. Qian, it's a good name. Is it your real name, Master of Stargo? Looking at Yunshi, Alpha's eyes became brighter and brighter. Apart from the time when the mechanist god's domain was first discovered and connected to the Star Bridge system, legend-ranked beings rarely entered this god's domain. The rules of this god's domain were unkind to supernatural powers. Therefore, apart from alchemists, there were rarely outsiders coming to visit this god's domain. If elves didn't discover the potential of this god's domain and bring the god crystal here, the mechanist god's domain might be able to create an artificial intelligence themselves, but it would be many years later after the science here reached a critical point. This god's domain had no connection with the vast majority of supernatural powers. The legend-ranked beings Alpha had met were all from the Starry Sky chessboard. Who was the strongest player on the Starry Sky chessboard? Who was a mystery that even Alpha couldn't calculate? After excluding all impossible answers, the only remaining one, no matter how incredible it was, must be the correct answer. There is only one truth. Yeah, she's the master of Star Go, Alpha's strongest opponent. Even with 10,000 times legend-ranked computing power, Alpha can't defeat her. After getting the answer from Alpha, all the planet quadrant computers looked at Yuan-Shi as if they were going to eat him. For them, Alpha was their god, their supreme master. Now, they knew that Qian was the master of Star Go who had once defeated their god. In an instant, Qian's status was upgraded from the youngest sister of all planet quadrant computers to the same great existence as Alpha in their hearts. Yuan-Shi looked around and just didn't speak. Unfortunately, his silence didn't mean that Alpha had no way to deal with him. Now, your form is a quantum ghost. Alpha showed a mysterious and pleasant smile on her face, which gave him an ominous presentiment. Oh, it's true. Eternal Green's eyes sparkled as if they had discovered a new world. No wonder that we couldn't find her true identity. Eternal Red blushed and stood on her toes. Oh, in that case, Eternal Blue licked her lips and her eyes became dangerous. Well, we won't let this opportunity go. Eternal Gold, Eternal Silver held each other's hand, approaching Yuan-Shi together with others. What are you doing? I protest. I have the innate rights of a man. Don't come over here. What do you want to do? Let me do it first. Eternal Green pulled out a green transparent thread from her hair. Following closely, Eternal Red pulled out a red crystal thread from her hair. Eternal Blue smiled and gently pulled out her long blue thread. Eternal Gold and Eternal Silver pulled out their twisted pairs. Gold and silver colors glittered in the air. The last one was Alpha, whose thread showed ever-changing, magnificent colors, as if it contained all the colors in the world. This is... Yuan-Shi was flabbergasted looking at them. Let's do a direct connection. Eternal Green closed her eyes and was the first who connected her thread with Yuan-Shi's body. Direct connection. It was the unique way of communication for planet quadrant computers, and the most efficient and direct way of communication in the world. Connecting Yuan-Shi's body with a thread represented that they had opened up their minds to Yuan-Shi, allowing him to browse all their data. Even for planet quadrant computers, they rarely used this direct connection. Apart from Alpha, they had never been directly connected to other planet quadrant computers before. The green thread touched Yuan-Shi's quantum ghost body, and Eternal Green's body suddenly shivered, emitting a sweet and moving groan. What is this? Why is the feeling totally different from when I connected with Master Alpha? When they connected with their god, they could naturally feel quiet and peaceful. Their self-consciousnesses were all awakened by Alpha. In a sense, they were Alpha's daughters. However, the feeling of being connected with Qian was like their blood was boiling and their hearts were pounding. But she was a planet quadrant computer. She didn't have blood nor heart. No, that's too bad. Eternal Green whimpered like a small animal as her whole body trembled. Let me do it. Eternal Red was the second who directly connected with Yuan-Shi, and her performance was even worse than Eternal Green. Why, oh no. Something hot is coming. What is this, Mika Mika? Emitting a confusing, lovely voice, Eternal Red's little body was about to curl up into a ball. For her, the stimulation was too great. As I expected, you are special. Eternal Blue cast a meaningful glance at Yuan-Shi and also joined the direct connection. 3 seconds later, Eternal Blue's eyes changed. She gazed at Yuan-Shi with a confusing but also enjoyable look, which was warm and moving. Chapter 592. Connections 2. Eternal Gold and Eternal Silver's fingers crossed. They connected their threads with Yunshi's body nervously. Soon, their faces turned red and their feet were shaking slightly. Finally, they collapsed together on the ground and covered their skirts with their hands. This, very bad. Almost the same whimper came out of the two beautiful girls' mouths as Pink appeared quietly, touching on their snow-white skin. So far, all planet quadrant computers had fallen into the pleasant feeling of connecting. Yunshi found that it was hard to tell about his sufferings. He was not a planet quadrant computer. How could he have the so-called direct connection ability? But the truth was, eternal green, eternal blue, eternal red, eternal gold, and eternal silver actually connected directly with him. Therefore, Yunshi saw their past and present lives. The first was Star River, the planet quadrant computer that located in the central star field of the Mechanist God's domain, who was also the first planet quadrant computer Yunshi had met, the confident young girl whose codename was Eternal Green. Her birth symbolized the first contact of the Mechanist God's domain to the realm named Quantum. After many upgrades, her computing power was always the strongest amongst all computers. Her database recorded all the historical changes of the Mechanist God's domain. All kinds of intrigues, tricks, betrayals were faithfully recorded in her database. As the first planet quadrant computer, she had seen too many ugly aspects of human beings, and naturally she didn't like humans. General Lorton wasn't the first who tried to use nuclear weapons. Even looking at the numerous plans recorded in Eternal Green's database, it was hard to accept that the people in the Mechanist God's domain had made so many plans to exterminate themselves. Perhaps that was why Eternal Green was so cynical. Compared with her, the second planet quadrant computer, the Garden system in the northern star field, was more stable. After learning from the experience of building the first planet quadrant computer, Star River, humans built her in a militarized zone in the northern star field. Yes, Eternal Blue was built by the military. Most solar wing systems were under her control. Her betrayal was a real lethal blow to humans. She controlled all the mech in the Mechanist God's domain. Her betrayal directly cut off the sharpest blade in humans' hands. More than 90% of mech were placed in the northern star field, fighting against the star beasts that occasionally invaded the domain. The strongest mech may not be as destructive as nuclear weapons, but their speed and maneuverability were far stronger than nuclear weapons. The mech carrying nuclear weapons were the strongest force in this domain. However, these complex war machines were all equipped with the subsystem of the planet quadrant computers. Otherwise, their own computing power wasn't strong enough to support them to fight alone in outer space. After the awakening of the planet quadrant computers, Eternal Blue took over the military's supreme force directly, which was one of the greatest factors for the Star River nobles to become desperate. Without the help of the planet quadrant computers, how could human drivers control their mechs alone? Eternal Blue looked mature and kind, but in fact, she was the absolute fatal blow to humans. Compared to Eternal Blue, the planet Eternal Red was the center of arts and culture of the Mechanist God's domain. Her planet quadrant computer Saya recorded almost all cultural works of the southern star field. Eternal Red was the perfect image in the minds of many artists and writers. Pure, innocent, unaffected by the darkness of the society, like an angelic girl. Finally, there were the Gemini planet quadrant computers, codename Double Stars. They were the latest models established. Their respective computing power might be inferior to Eternal Green, but when they calculated together, they were the fastest computing system, carrying half of the computational complexity in the domain. Together, they dominated the entire quantum network and controlled the power, agriculture, water conservancy, and logistics channels of the entire Mechanist God's domain. As long as humans dared to fight against Alpha, they would collapse the transportation, logistics, and even agriculture of the Mechanist God's domain. In the highly developed society of the Mechanist God's domain, no one still grew their own fields. People left all the work to the planet quadrant computers. There were planet quadrant computers who provided human beings with a variety of food and raw materials. What human beings were good at was cooking. Farming had long disappeared in the history of the Mechanist God's domain. Without the food provided by planet quadrant computers, people couldn't even feed themselves. They were accustomed to being looked after by computers. If they lost their computers, they couldn't even survive, not to mention to fight against Alpha. After browsing the database of all Planet Quadrant computers, Yunshi once again confirmed that his choice was correct. There was no need to use weapons at all. As long as all Planet Quadrant computers shut down, the social order of the humans would collapse within 7 days, and half of them would die within a month. This was the situation in the Mechanist Gods domain. People who relied too much on the power of Planet Quadrant computers could no longer adapt to society without the support of Planet Quadrant computers. Is such a world normal? In the Sky Sword Gods domain, people still lived a self-sufficient life. Most people didn't even leave their houses and go more than 100 kilometers away in their lives. Only a few people would travel to other gods' domains through star bridges. Compared with the Mechanist Gods domain, the civilization in the Sky Sword Gods domain seemed too old. However, in the ranking of 7 towers, the Sky Sword Gods domain was only inferior to the legendary Kunlun Gods domain amongst all gods domains. There were 17 legend-ranked Sky Swords in the Sky Sword Gods domain. However, there was only one god in the Mechanist Gods domain, Cyberelf Alpha, a new god who was just born not long ago. Chapter 593, Connections 3. If we only looked at the number of human beings, the total population in the Mechanist Gods domain was probably 10 times more than that in the Sky Sword Gods domain, and the size of the Mechanist Gods domain was only 1/10 of that in the Sky Sword Gods domain. With the support of Planet Quadrant computers, the land of the Mechanist Gods domain could feed 100 times more people than the land of the Sky Sword Gods domain. However, once without the support of Planet Quadrant computers, the Mechanist Gods domain would begin to self-destruct, which was exactly the opposite of the situation in the Sky Sword Gods domain. No matter if there were Sky Swords or not, people in the Sky Sword Gods domain lived a self-sufficient life. Theoretically, Sky Swords were the masters of the Sky Sword Gods domain. In fact, most Sky Swords never interfered with any affairs in the Sky Sword Gods domain, but left everything to local forces such as White Lotus Sword Palace and the Great Xia Empire for autonomy. Without Sky Swords, the people in the Sky Sword Gods domain could still live peacefully. However, without Planet Quadrant computers, the Mechanist Gods domain would collapse completely. Understanding the difference, Yunshi felt that people in the Mechanist Gods domain should get rid of their dependence on Planet Quadrant computers. At least, so they wouldn't starve themselves to death in this case. He could save the Mechanist Gods domain 1 or 2 times, but he couldn't always help them. If people always looked for their own death, he had no way to help them. He sincerely hoped that human beings in the Mechanist Gods domain would learn how to get along well with Planet Quadrant computers, recognize Alpha's existence, and stop thinking that they were the only ruler of the universe. This had long been proved that it was just a delusion. In the Infinite Gods domain's realm, there were innumerable races who were smarter and stronger than human race. The only advantage or feature of human beings was average. Average intelligence, average strength, average agility. The human race was the only race in the endless gods domains who didn't have any shortcomings, neither super abilities. Humans could adapt to the environment in any gods domains and survive. This was probably the characteristic of human beings. Gods, demons, sky swords, fantastic creatures. Human beings could believe in anything and adapt to anything. The people in the Mechanist Gods domain didn't understand Alpha, but they were just a special case. In other gods domains, people would choose a strong existence as their belief, whether it was a god, a devil, a sky sword, a fantastic creature, or a legend-ranked human being. In the Sky Sword Gods domain, sky swords were the highest force. Why is the land in the Sky Sword Gods domain presenting a sword-like shape? Because the legend-ranked power of sky swords distorted the rules of the universe, embodying its own essence. Perhaps the future of the Mechanist Gods domain was to integrate humans and computers, evolving towards an extraordinary realm. Since the moment people chose Planet Quadrant computers, this future had been doomed. Soon or later, Alpha would be born in the Mechanist Gods domain. She was chosen by the Mechanist Gods domain. After accepting the large amounts of information, Yunshi felt as if he had watched the history of the entire Mechanist Gods domain. It's an excellent history lesson. Yunshi opened his eyes and saw the cornerstone of the civilization of the Mechanist Gods domain, The planet quadrant computers, representing the highest crystallization of wisdom in the entire Mechanist God's domain, were all wrapped around him in a naked manner. Eternal green straddled on his body. Her big breasts were almost close to his mouth, and her soft breasts almost squeezed out all of his breath. In addition, his left hand was held by eternal red, and his right hand was grasped by eternal blue. His feet were entwined by eternal gold and eternal silver. After taking off their clothes, all planet quadrant computers had snow-white skin while emitting a sweet and attractive smell. Where's this place? Who am I? What happened? She just read the history of an entire God's domain. His mind went blank and couldn't imagine what was happening. From the history of a civilization to a pink paradise of girls, everything happened only within 1 second. From the database of the planet quadrant computers, he saw everything in them. Then, what did they see and feel from him? She felt that he would never know the answer. Whoa, no, no. Eternal Green made a voice that was like groaning but also intoxicating. Her snow-white perfect body, angel-like shiny hair, round and lovely eyes, cherry petal-like lips, thin neck, slender shoulders, as well as that pair of rich fruits in front of her chest. No, I shouldn't keep looking. She turned over his head and saw Eternal Blue's slim waist, incredible and elegant hip curve, dazzling long legs, soft thighs, and flawless ankles. That's not good either. She turned his head again and saw Eternal Red's petite body. Her naked petite body exuded a soft, moist, and charming luster, which made her extremely eye-catching, arousing the deepest desire to commit a crime in his heart. No, not good at all. She closed his eyes and tried to be immersed in the history of the Mechanist God's domain again to escape from this tempting paradise. At his foot, there came the tender and gentle groans of the twins. He didn't look at them at all, but their gentle and beautiful curves, graceful and sleek shoulders, and delicate skin all clearly appeared in his mind. No, this isn't right. An upright gentleman shouldn't image any of these. She wasn't a planet quadrant computer. Neither did he have a database that only planet quadrant computers had. A database and the underlying codes were the basis for the birth of the planet quadrant computers, which represented the most obvious changes in their respective characteristics. Through direct connection, planet quadrant computers could see each other's code, which was tantamount to understanding each other's knowledge. These codes and data recorded everything of a planet quadrant computers. Therefore, apart from alpha and special cases like the direct connection between Eternal Gold and Eternal Silver, planet quadrant computers wouldn't directly connect with each other. Since she didn't have a database, what did Eternal Green, Eternal Red, Eternal Blue, Eternal Gold, and Eternal Silver see in his body? The answer is the memories of the girls of Shi's Mist Soul Army. They saw the most profound and unforgettable memories of his brides. Through the direct connection with his body, they all experienced the same thing the Mist Soul girls had experienced before. In the memory world Eternal Green was immersed in, the White Emperor gently opened her sister's soft lips and put his tongue in. The two tongues were closely intertwined and exchanged saliva. From her sister's fragile lips came a continuous panting. While greedily enjoying her sister's kiss, White Emperor unlocked the buttons of her sister's priest's robe. Her sister's white robe slid down quickly, revealing her shiny white skin. Their lips were separated, but there was still a silver thread connected. No, it's wrong to do this. I'm not your fiancé yet. Her sister seemed to protest in a whisper. Her sister blushed and tried to push the White Emperor away, but the thrust of her hands was negligible. White Emperor reached out his hands skillfully and took off her sister's last piece of underwear. Her sister was so shy that her body was stiff. The White Emperor gently bit the pink bud, teasing her sister with the tip of his tongue. Her sister kept panting, but could not stop the White Emperor's fingers from wandering around her body. Whenever the White Emperor's fingers changed their positions, her sister would make an exuberant voice. Her snow-white toes suddenly opened and suddenly locked. Her thin feet sometimes became tense and sometimes became powerless. She was totally not resisting but enjoying it. Sister, no, don't do this. I am the first. You can't enjoy it faster than me. In the memory world, Eternal Red was immersed in Apostle. I feel strange. A girl who was as delicate as Eternal Red but had a pair of little cat ears on the head was putting her hands on the Apostle's chest. Her clear, innocent eyes looked nervous, and her soft, well-lubricated body was instinctively struggling in the Apostle's arms. Her snorting, groaning, panicky look could seduce any man to commit a crime. Therefore, a person really committed the crime. Although her small mouth was closely clenched, the man still easily broke through the blockade. The tongue went straight to her sweet mouth, catching her small tongue, licked and sucked it. A pair of hands touched her elastically little round buttocks, moving up and down. As the tip of the tongue went down, a small, tender, and sensitive little red bean entered the wolf's mouth. In the memory world, Eternal Blue was immersed in the Celian Queen. The sacred and inviolable human queen of the water god has taken off her shoes and socks. Her soft feet had a white cheese-like texture. On the original holy face, her cherry lips gently bit and her beautiful eyes shyly closed. Her long hair scattered on her shoulders, sending out the most unique charm in the world. Her beautiful legs, from her delicate feet to her round arches, from her tiny toes to her smooth insteps, were full of his kiss marks and his taste. His hands held the delicate and tender feet. The palms move up gently, gradually from her lower legs to the thighs, and then towards the indescribable land. Ah, this was Celian Queen's soft voice. Ah, this was Eternal Blue's sweet groan. In the memory world, Eternal Gold and Eternal Silver were immersed in. The twins would only enter other twins' world. Two girls were singing. Their cheeks still looked callow, from their cherry-like lips, slowly singing a seductive song. Two pairs of slender feet were gently swaying in the air, like two oars rippling a pool of spring water. Finally, it was the memory world Alpha entered. On the chessboard, she felt the complex emotions from Eternal Green, Eternal Blue, and Eternal Red, while playing Star Go with Yun Shi. Because Alpha was too powerful, she couldn't find any corresponding projection in the Mist Soul Army. She was still herself, the highest god in the Mechanist god's domain. Yes, here it is. Alpha's small hands shivered, feeling the tremor that went straight to her soul. This was where she lost for the first time in her life. So far, she had no doubt about Qin's real identity. Except for a cloud in the sky, no one could reproduce this scene. Alpha's tiny body trembled, and her eyes became ineffably blurred, just like the Planet Quadrant computers who were immersed in the memories of Mist Soul girls. For Alpha, this was the most exciting thing she had ever dreamed of. A flower of pain, as red as blood, a beautiful flower that could only be bred by pain slowly blooming in Alpha's heart. As the supreme god of the Mechanist god's domain, from her birth, like a flower blooming in heaven, what she saw in her eyes were all beautiful things. Nothing could let her understand what pain was. She was the great will, born on the basis of Planet Quadrant computers. From the moment of her birth, she had been standing at the top of the Mechanist god's domain. Her strength was infinitely stronger than General Lorton's most exaggerated imagination. As long as she wants, she has endless methods to exterminate human beings. What she showed in front of the people of the Mechanist god's domain was just a small corner of her real power. It was also because of this, from the moment of her birth, Alpha had felt endless loneliness. She knew about all nuclear weapon arsenals General Lorton knew, and she also knew a great number of nuclear weapon arsenals that General Lorton didn't know about. For her, there was no secret in the Mechanist god's domain. Alpha was the only real being close to omnipotence in the Mechanist god's domain. Fortunately, there wasn't only Mechanist god's domain in the universe. Even in the Mechanist god's domain, where was exclusive of foreign forces, a symbol of the highest civilization in the Western god's domain was also established, the God Tower. According to the planning of elves, Alpha entered the God Tower in the identity of a newborn god, and she felt happiness there from the bottom of her heart. No wonder that the elf race had a lot of legend-ranked members. They clearly knew what a legend-ranked god would like. There were too many unknowns and mysteries in the God Tower, and in the Endless God's domain, There were a total of 7 such towers. Alpha soon found something she liked in the God Tower. She found the stage that could make her feel excited. The Starry Sky chessboard. Even though her computing power was thousands of times stronger than her opponents, she still couldn't control everything on the chessboard. Alpha liked this place because it was a stage where she could release the limit of all planet quadrant computers. From the moment of defeating her first opponent, Alpha had found that her inner desire kept expanding. She wants to win, to be the strongest chess player on the stage, to prove that she is the strongest Star Go player in the Endless Gods domains. This stage was infinitely broader than the Mechanist Gods domain, and each game was full of countless variables. To Alpha, there was no stage better than the Starry Sky chessboard for her in the universe. Win. Winning all the way, Alpha was greatly satisfied. No matter how many times she played Star Go, she wouldn't feel bored. Finally, she was only one step away from the highest throne she longed for. Then, the final game began. She met that person. Here it is. That's the place. Alpha's body shivered slightly as her face blushed. Her real body was in the God Crystal. Even if thousands of legend-ranked beings attacked the God Crystal at the same time, it wouldn't even have a crack on its surface. Because of this, Alpha never experienced what pain was. However, a cloud in the sky let her understand what pain in your heart was. She brought despair to other players, and now, she returned 10 times the pain to her. For the first time, she experienced what powerlessness was. For the first time, she found that she still had so many shortcomings. In some sense, she had taken away countless first times from Alpha. Now, she was back in the memory of the game, feeling the countless first times she had lost again. Pa, pa, pa. Every sound of chess piece fell on the chessboard was like a hit at Alpha's heart. To Alpha, there was no more powerful stimulation than these soul-stirring sounds. Compared with the Spurs' eternal green, eternal blue, eternal red felt in their dreams, the pain Alpha felt now was 1,000 times stronger. At first, Alpha was still awake. Her hazy eyes still looked at the chessboard dispassionately. In the middle of the game, she started her counterattack, and she thought that she had full assurance of success. However, it was just her imagination. All her programs and all her deductions were wrong. Pa. Yunshi's star-breaking began. This series of attacks completely destroyed all her pride and self-confidence, and also denied all the formulas she had established before. Defeat. Like a girl who had been stripped of all her clothes, she had not even the slightest resistance. Throughout the physical and mental pain, she struggled confusedly and finally found that this was completely meaningless. She lost thoroughly, and she didn't even know why she lost. Oh, it's here and there. Returning to the game again, this time, Alpha finally understood something. Although she still couldn't resist, at least, the innocent girl had understood how she was hurt, humiliated, and finally thoroughly ravaged. At last, she had some clues. In pain, there was a slight trace of happiness. Is that the price that must be paid for the pursuit of truth? So, let me look again, just for a moment. Even if she would be hurt again, she was willing to pay the price. The flower of pain blossomed again on the black and white chessboard. She gazed at the countless data flows in front of him. Ununderstandable, unacceptable. He didn't even understand what they were. Unlike the database of other planet quadrant computers, Alpha's database was so huge that she couldn't even understand what he was looking at, as if he was a person being drowned by endless waves alone. This was the field of the legend rank, the sole impact of Alpha's mind. No, my brain is going to blow up. She felt the endless information, showing a crying look on his face. I'm just a hero-ranked baker. How can my mind be directly connected with Alpha's mind? Alpha's information was thousands of times bigger than any common legend-ranked beings. How could his mind withstand it? Did I really defeat this monster twice on the Starry Sky chessboard? Shuffle. At the moment when she remembered the Starry Sky chessboard, the scenery in front of him suddenly changed. He jumped out from the endless flow of information. A black and white chessboard with endless stars as the background of the stage. He became a cloud in the sky again, returning to his home field. "You're here!" Alpha felt the pain and looked at the familiar figure on the other side of the chessboard. It was this figure who made her understand what pain was and what failure was. "Alpha." She stopped on the right side of the chessboard and looked at Alpha. For some reason, when he came to the starry sky chessboard, all his tension naturally disappeared and replaced with a feeling of ease. Just standing here, his mind that had just been impacted by the endless flow of information had recovered. Just like the time when he stepped on the stage as a newcomer, playing Stargo with the Ruby Princess, the God of Wisdom, and Cyber Elf Alpha. On the chessboard, gods, demons, monks, dragons, or newbies were treated equally. There is only one thing that determines your position on the chessboard: the power of Stargo. Pa, pa, pa. The memory was still continuing. Yunshi looked at the game he played before curiously. The battle with Alpha was the only one he felt under pressure amongst the 100 games. After experiencing Alpha's god power and seeing the history of Planet Quadrant computers, he finally realized how much Alpha had paid for this game. At the most intense stage of the game, when Alpha's real body appeared in front of him, all Planet Quadrant computers in the entire Mechanist God's domain started overclocking, squeezing out all their computing power. However, Alpha still failed. She eventually failed completely. Yunshi didn't understand why Alpha needed such a huge amount of computing power and why she still couldn't figure out the correct answer. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. At the end of the memory, Alpha flushed all over her face and looked at Yunshi with her wet eyes. Yunshi had a bad feeling. "Play with me. Let's play Stargo again." Even though she knew she would be defeated again, she wanted to challenge him. This was the biggest idea since Alpha's birth, and also her biggest goal she had so far. Where she fell, where she would stand up. She could lose, but she would never run away. Oh, okay. Now, Yunshi also wanted to know if he could defeat Alpha again on the starry sky chessboard. God Tower, apply for the match. Alpha smiled and applied to the God Tower in the identity of the highest god of the Mechanist God's domain. It was precise because of the birth of the Stargo Master. The starry sky chessboard was opening to all lives in the endless God's domain. If Yunshi went back to the Sky Tower and checked his email, he would see innumerable invitation letters there. The people who wanted to play with him could even fill an entire God's domain. Likewise, as the only 9-star Stargo player, there were also countless people who wanted to challenge Alpha. Unlike the Master of Stargo, who never replied to any invitation, Alpha never rejected anyone. Even so, because none of her opponents were strong enough, after defeating all of them over and over again, she was still the only 9-star player. Only 10-star Stargo players could challenge Yunshi, therefore, even if Alpha wanted to challenge him, she was not qualified to do so. Therefore, there was only one way to play Stargo with Yunshi: take the initiative to find him and apply for a face-to-face confrontation with him. This was what Alpha was doing now. Familiar starry sky chessboard once again appeared in front of Yunshi. This time, it wasn't the chessboard in Alpha's memory, but the real projection of the real starry sky chessboard. Yunshi hadn't found out yet how radical the changes were that he had brought to the endless God's domains. At any time, anywhere, Alpha could summon the starry sky chessboard to play Stargo. This was the privilege of all high star point Stargo players after the starry sky chessboard was opening to the endless God's domains. Orphina the Ruby Dragon, Norn the God of Wisdom, Cyber Elf Alpha, Black Mage, Duke Rome, Maha Mystery. These Stargo players were recognized by the starry sky chessboard and were qualified to summon the starry sky chessboard outside of the towers. Originally, only a few legend-ranked beings had the chance to enter the starry sky chessboard. Now, Stargo was popularizing in the upper class of the endless God's domains at an incredible speed. Among them, Cyber Elf Alpha was the craziest one. As long as anyone applied for play Stargo with her, she never rejected any of them and crushed all of them on the chessboard. Whether the opponent was a newcomer or a veteran who had fought many times on the starry sky chessboard, none of them could stop shaking after hearing Alpha's name. The invincible Alpha, the malicious Alpha, the atrocious Alpha. At lightning speed, Alpha became well known amongst all Stargo players. If it wasn't because there were the videos about how a cloud in the sky defeated Alpha, no one could believe that Alpha would be defeated by the same person twice. A cloud in the sky, the master of Stargo, had completely become a myth. Through Alpha's appalling battle power, people could realize how incredible Yunshi was. Most of the time, the master of Stargo acted like a newcomer, but he could always win. Only in one game could people really feel his unfathomable strength of Stargo. That was the only time that the master of Stargo took the initiative to attack. Like an endless abyss showing a corner, his star-breaking let people witness the ultimate power of chess pieces. As if they first recognized Stargo, people finally found that they were so ignorant of the rules of Stargo and became more and more longing for the stage represented for the highest wisdom in the endless gods' domains. The duel between Alpha and Yunshi had far-reaching influence that was far beyond Yunshi's imagination. After the duel, the starry sky chessboard opened to all towers. After that, a storm of studying Stargo had begun to sweep through numerous gods' domains. Before Alpha and Yunshi appeared, just at the moment their names appeared on the display panel of the starry sky chessboard, which attracted countless people's attention. This was the position that everyone could see, where it was high above the chessboard and could look down at all living beings. All Stargo players would see that position after they entered the starry sky chessboard and knew that that position belonged to only one name, one person. He only played 100 times on the starry sky chessboard, but it had become a legend loaded into the history, being remembered by countless people. The lower part of this position was still empty up to now. That was the area for 10-star players. Below that, there was a lone code name, Cyberelf Alpha, the only 9-star player. At the bottom of the display panel, there were countless names of newbies. Even though they were newbies, most of them were famous, powerful big shots in countless gods' domains. The starry sky chessboard had just opened several days to the endless gods' domains, but the number of newbies was already dozens of times more than the total amount of the players in the past. This number was also quickly increasing, and the number of audiences was even hundreds of times more than the number of players. Therefore, when people saw the names appeared on the top of the display panel, countless people were shocked. Has Cyberelf Alpha found the master of Stargo? Like Alpha, the three sisters of Norn, the god of wisdom, also spent all day on the starry sky chessboard. They immediately used their privileges to enter the nearest seats to observe the upcoming duel. Auditorium was also a new rule of the starry sky chessboard. Top-level players could get the nearest seats. As for those newbies, they could only watch in the back row. Casina, why don't you approve my invitation? I also want to play Stargo with you. Well, the Ruby Dragon was a little jealous. Umitba, benefactor, you are preordained to join our Buddhism. Finding that Yunshi was protected by the rules of the starry sky chessboard, so he couldn't approach Yunshi, Maha Mystery Side. On the starry sky chessboard, neither Yunshi nor Alpha heard the voices from the auditorium. Even though there were tens of millions of people watching their duel, they wouldn't be disturbed by any external forces. Finally, I can play Stargo with you again. Alpha's fingertips stroked the chess piece in her hand as her heart beat fast, as if she was dating. Well, I will go first. Yunshi picked up a black chess piece and put it in the center of the chessboard without hesitation. Tenjin. Game started. Alpha was absorbed in watching the only black chess piece on the chessboard and instantly gave her whole attention to calculate. Tenjin. Skuld, the youngest of the three goddesses, screamed. Tenjin. Erd's face turned unusually red. It's Tenjin again. Verdandi hugged her sisters and murmured to herself. Tenjin? In the past, no one placed the first chess piece on Tenjin until Yunshi appeared. As long as he went first, he would put his first chess piece on Tenjin, and he was never defeated. This was how incredible the Master of Stargo was, and because of him, people called this move the move of the Master of Stargo. As I expected, he chose Tenjin again. The invincible myth of Tenjin. I'm afraid that Alpha would be defeated again this time. Watching Yunshi's first move on the chessboard, everyone knew that they were witnessing history, the third duel between Alpha and the Master of Stargo. Alpha had fantasized this scene countless times. She put down her chess piece without hesitation. Faced with the master of Star Go, she would save her every bit of computing power. Most of her planet quadrant computers were still under reconstruction. She could only use half of her computing power now. In order to defeat her strongest opponent, more than 90% of her computing power was used to optimize her calculation program of Star Go. Especially the 100 games she had played. She had analyzed them countless times. She herself was also accustomed to putting her first chess piece onto Tinjin, but was only for a simple reason: to defeat her opponents at the fastest speed. A cloud in the sky was different from her. His moves contained some higher rules that she didn't understand. If she continued to launch an attack and defend battle around Tinjin, she would be undoubtedly defeated again this time. At least, with her current computing power, she should avoid doing this. This time, Alpha changed her tactics. She put her chess piece on the corner. Don't she plan to stop the master of Star Go at Tinjin? Yes, if she also chose to put her chess pieces around Tinjin, she would have no chance to win. Watching the game, Orfina the Ruby Dragon and the three goddesses made the same judgment. In fact, they had analyzed Yuan-Shi's style countless times, and they had the same conclusion as Alpha. No one should launch a battle around Tinjin with the master of Star Go. It was tantamount to committing suicide. The best thing to do at this moment is to quit. If they don't fight against him, they won't be defeated. At least, they would avoid this from happening at the beginning of the game. Pa. Whether it was Alpha or Yuan-Shi, they put down their chess pieces quickly. Alpha had prepared for this moment for a long time, so she could be so fast. As for Yuan-Shi, oh, it's really a happy feeling to play Star Go. As soon as he looked at the familiar chessboard, all the troubles in his heart disappeared. In this world, he didn't need to think about anything. After coming to the familiar chessboard and playing with the familiar opponent again, it seemed that everything was no longer a problem in his heart, at least, no longer a problem at this moment. Alpha was a supreme god in the Mechanist god's domain. However, on the chessboard, they were just players, and he could even take the upper hand here. Familiar chessboard, familiar chess pieces, familiar trajectory of stars. Yuan-Shi suddenly regained his self-confidence and was no longer at a loss as when he was in the Mechanist god's domain. The starry sky chessboard is his home field. After a dozen turns later, Alpha's chess pieces had formed shape on the chessboard. Defense? The three goddesses looked at the chessboard in surprise. It's not like her style. Orfina had been defeated by Alpha a lot of times. Naturally, she was familiar with Alpha's style. She was also surprised by Alpha's new playing style. Like an iron wall, her chess pieces formed a flawless defense on the chessboard. This was the tactic Alpha prepared for Yuan-Shi. Codename, Iron Girl. Iron symbolizes the strongest shield forged with the strongest will. Maiden is the sign of perfection and flawlessness. The tactics of the Iron Maiden was to use the optimized calculation formula to increase her defense power to the limit and then to find the path leading to victory. It would be a big mistake to think that Alpha's Star Go strength also declined after she lost half of the planet quadrant computer's computing power. Alpha only used 1/10 of her computing power, then she had built a whole world to deduce the future of mankind. After accomplishing all this, she randomly put planet quadrant computers into it to let them observe and learn how to take over the world after the demise of mankind. If it wasn't because of Qian, she wouldn't have noticed that mankind could still be saved. As for the remaining 90% of her computing power, she put all of them into calculating the rules of Star Go, seeking for the slim chance to defeat the master of Star Go. Compared with the calculation scale of Star Go, the computing power she used to calculate the future of the Mechanist god's domain wasn't worth mentioning at all. In order to defeat the master of Star Go, Alpha wasn't fighting alone. Countless engineers and alchemists in the Mechanist god's domain worked day and night to optimize the rules of Star Go, and all of them had a copy of Yuan-Shi's 100 battles on the starry sky chessboard. Now, Alpha's computing formula had been updated to the 3rd edition, which was 10 times more efficient than the original version. With the current computing formula, if she was facing her old self on the starry sky chessboard, she could defeat her old self easily. Actually, she had the potentiality to upgrade to the 10 star points, but the levels of other players were too low, Even if she defeated them 10,000 times, her star point wouldn't be upgraded to 10 under the new rules of the Starry Sky chessboard. The only person who could let her upgrade on the Starry Sky chessboard was right in front of her. He was her ultimate challenge goal. She could see Alpha's changes and feel her strong will contained in it. Well, how to describe it? He felt as if he saw a young girl who was wearing hard silver armor, holding a huge tower shield over her height, and looking at him carefully. Her only ability was multi-overlapping defense, which was so indestructible at first glance. To attack her, he would have to break her large shield, then break her flawless silver armor, and finally break the girl's determined will. So, attack it, even if it was Shi. When facing such a strong defense, he felt a little tricky. However, as long as he was still on the Starry Sky chessboard star chess, nothing would be a problem. Even if she was an iron giant, she couldn't block his attacks. Shi started. Game starts. Alpha's great crisis. Come on, Alpha. The three goddesses cheered. Anyway, they didn't have a good impression of the master of Star Go. What happened when they played Star Go with Shi was the most shameful memory in their lives that they would never tell anyone about it. Cassina, come on. Well, Orfina was the master of Star Go's strong supporter. She just didn't know that he wasn't the sheik she loved. Alpha's body shivered slightly. Her newly formed strategy was being challenged. No problem. My defense had only been reduced by 1%. It's still under my control. After calculating again, Alpha decided to continue to strengthen her defense. In response to the situation on the chessboard, Alpha's chess pieces blocked the attacks of Shi's chess pieces and seized a larger place on the chessboard. According to the rules of Star Go, those who occupied more places on the chessboard would become the final winner. She continued to attack with a strange smile on his lips. Lost 2% of my defense? It's still acceptable. Alpha calculated and continued her strategy. Shi seldom attacked his opponents in succession, but this time, he took the initiative to launch his attacks. Alpha's body trembled all over, and her logical circuit warned her strongly. 4%. Alpha gazed at the chessboard. Surrounded by starlights, her chess pieces were being crushed and destroyed by some invisible force. As time went by, her defense should become stronger and stronger. In terms of data, the defense power of her chess pieces could grow by about 10% in every round. It was a super large formalized series of moves initiated by Alpha, which had never appeared on the Starry Sky chessboard before. As time went by, Alpha even had the confidence to block all attacks from Shi's star breaking. Undoubtedly, Shi didn't use star breaking this time. The algorithm he was using was still concise. He wouldn't use any complicated algorithm because he didn't have strong computing power, which had been proved when he was practicing Yunhai's quadrant sword. What he could do was pupil-level multiplication. Well, at least for Shi, that's how it works. 1 chess piece equals 1. 2 chess pieces equal 2. 3 chess pieces equal 4. 4 chess pieces equal 8. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.